Chapter 118. I'm prepared to take down Silvermoon City. What do you think? The Knight of Rigo turned around to look at the officers accompanying him. His words almost scared them silly. My lord, this isn't good. What's not good about it? The Knight of Rigo glared. His shiny bald head reflected the sunlight, making him look exceptionally ferocious and frightening. We only have 1,000 people. Can we take it down? An officer asked cautiously. The Knight of Rigo said disdainfully. Isn't Silvermoon City famous for surrendering without a fight? Who knows, they might just surrender the moment we attack. The officers were speechless for a moment. If Silvermoon City surrendered without a fight when faced with an army of 1,000 people, then the half-elf kingdom might as well disband. My lord, if nothing happened in the city, and it's really just because of the wedding and we attack rashly, then wouldn't that be too much of a joke? Yes. My lord, our brothers have been rushing for a long time. We don't have the strength to attack the city now. My lord, why don't we send someone back to the northern frontier to deliver a letter? If something really happens in Silvermoon City, Lord Duke of St. Hilda won't sit idly by. Hearing that his officers were unanimously against attacking the city, the Knight of Rigo immediately snorted unhappily. However, he wasn't a completely reckless madman. He could still listen to the advice of others. He nodded and said, All right, then we'll set up camp outside the city and rest. We'll pay attention to the movements in the city. If anything happens in the city, we'll immediately charge in. Yes. The officers instantly heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly replied. My lord, should we send someone to deliver a letter to chilly Winter City? An officer reminded. The Knight of Rigo shook his head. No need. The Viscounts has already made arrangements. He clearly thought of the carrier pigeon that Colin had asked him to bring back to Icestone City before he set off. If something really happened to Colin in Silvermoon City, and Icestone City couldn't receive the news on time, they would naturally know what to do. Yes. The officer was a little puzzled, but he still nodded in response. Nightleg turned around and looked at the heavily guarded Silvermoon City with a worried expression. He sighed and said, Sigh. I hope that the Viscounts will not suffer any grievances in the city. Awesome. Colin finished the cup of iced deer blood wine in one gulp and moaned comfortably. I didn't expect you to like deer blood wine so much. Vera placed her hand on her cheek as she looked at Colin curiously. Do you need more ice? I can make some more for you. There's enough ice. Actually, I learned to drink deer blood from my father. Colin decisively used his dead father as an excuse. He said that a real knight should drink blood. Why? Because. Colin scratched his head and spouted nonsense. Because blood is the essence of life, and it contains many beneficial substances. So that's how it is. I remember seeing my father drink bear blood when I was young. Vera suddenly realized that the Angeli family's emblem was a white bear. She quickly apologized. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Colin waved his hand. It's okay, I'm not that sensitive. In fact, he had wanted to change the emblem for a long time. Roaring white bear? At first glance, it was obvious that the Angeli family was not elegant at all. Then, is the deer blood wine enough for you? Don't you need to eat something else? I don't need it, you can eat. Currently, Vera was pretending to be dead, so the food that was sent in was naturally only enough for one person. Therefore, Colin gave the food to Vera. But I can't eat so much. You should eat some too. Vera pushed the half-eaten plate in front of Colin and persuaded him with a smile. Colin knew that she meant well, although he did not need to eat ordinary food. In order to make Vera feel at ease, he obediently stuffed the rest of the food into his stomach. Are we going to wait for the army from the northern frontier to arrive at Silvermoon City? Yes. But the House of Medea has sealed off Silvermoon City. We can't send any news back to Winter City, right? Haha, are they going to seal it off forever? Colin said disdainfully. Besides, no news is actually a kind of news. Vera suddenly realized. That's right. If father doesn't receive any news of my marriage, he will definitely know that something has happened to Silvermoon City. Colin nodded in agreement, even though he actually meant something else. In fact, the current development of Silvermoon City did not really satisfy Colin. According to the current script, Even if the army of the north arrived at Silvermoon City, the House of Medea would still have a way to secure the throne. The Miller family would probably become the scapegoat. The crime of killing Vera was enough to make the family disappear from the world completely. However, this was obviously not in Colin's interest. First of all, Queen Aisha was also a member of the Miller family. Colin did not want to see his second-blood descendant be abolished. Moreover, Colin did not want the half-elf kingdom to fall into the control of the House of St. Hilda. This rich but weak small kingdom had already aroused Colin's greed. He wanted to control this kingdom personally. Moreover, Colin now had an excellent chess piece, Queen Aisha. It would be a waste if he did not make good use of it. As long as he could control the half-elf kingdom, Colin would not have to worry about the cavalry's military expenses anymore. Perhaps I should encourage a certain ambitious person, Colin whispered to himself. What? Vera was just about to ask what Colin said when she heard someone knocking on the door. Colin quickly carried Vera and placed her into the coffin. Then, he slowly opened the door and let the half-elf female slave Kathy in. Sir Viscounts, have you finished your meal? Yes, you can clean up. Yes. Looking at Kathy, who was lowering her head to clean up the table, Colin suddenly said, You should have a way to contact the people outside the palace, right? Kathy looked at Colin carefully and hesitated for a moment. However, she did not dare to speak. Don't be afraid. We are now in the same boat. Colin smiled. Then, regardless of whether Kathy believed him or not, he continued speaking. I know that the Savoy family wants to regain the half-elf throne. It is indeed a good idea to let Vera die in the palace. The House of Medea is very likely to be abolished under the wrath of the northern frontier. However, the House of Medea is obviously not going to sit still and wait for their doom. Do you want to know what they are going to do? Kathy's hands trembled, and there was a flash of hesitation on her face. After a while, she finally raised her head and looked at Colin. There was no longer any trace of fear in her eyes. She straightened her chest, and it seemed as though she did not want to show her fear in front of Colin. However, her young and inexperienced face and simple clothes made her seem a little lacking in confidence. Sir Viscounts, may I know what news you have received? Colin smiled and said, Why? Have you admitted your identity? Kathy pursed her lips and did not speak. It's fine if you don't want to admit it. However, I can't give you my news for free. May I know what you want? I want to know if there is an army of the Angeli family outside Silvermoon City right now? Kathy frowned and said, I am sorry, sir. Silvermoon City is now in lockdown. We cannot contact the outside world. I am not asking you to contact them. I just want you to confirm their existence. Don't tell me that you can't do such a simple thing. Okay. Kathy finally nodded. Then, what is the bad news you are talking about? Colin showed a bright smile and said, Go and tell Sith that the House of Medea has already imprisoned the messenger of the eastern region. I guess they want to use this as a bargaining chip to completely turn to the northern frontier. So, if the Savoy family does not do something quickly, the half-elf throne will most likely still belong to the House of Medea, and you will be completely eliminated after you lose your value. Sure enough, after hearing the news, Kathy suddenly opened her eyes wide. Is this true? She obviously did not believe Colin. Colin spread his hands and said, You can ask Sith to check it out. Don't you have other informants in the palace? Kathy left in a hurry, with an anxious face. Vera poked her head out of the coffin and asked curiously, Colin, you have been imprisoned here all this time. How do you know that the messenger of the eastern region has been arrested? Colin smiled mysteriously. I naturally have my ways to find out. Chapter 119. The streets of Silverymoon City had become deserted. A middle-aged half-elf pressed down on his hat as he hurriedly walked through the streets filled with fallen leaves. But soon, a group of patrolling guards stopped him. Name? Roth. What are you doing? Where are you going? After a routine inspection and questioning, Roth was allowed to leave. He walked around the streets for a long time, before finally walking into an inconspicuous tavern. After passing through the noisy main hall, Roth entered the kitchen with great familiarity. He was then led into a hidden basement by a chef. Brother, Kathy sent an urgent message from the palace. Under the dim candlelight, A half-elf in the basement raised his head. It was Sith from the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce. Sith frowned as he took the small piece of paper from Roth. He said unhappily, "The people from the House of Medea are looking for us. Why would she take the risk to send a message?" Roth sighed. "It should be very important information. In order to send it out, 3 of our spies in the palace have been killed." Sith's frown deepened, but he still patiently flipped open the piece of paper and took out a book from the bookshelf. After he finished translating the ciphertext on the note, his expression instantly became extremely solemn. "What's wrong?" Roth asked worriedly when he saw his brother's expression change. Sith passed the translated piece of paper to his brother and said seriously, "We have to take action. We can't just sit here and wait." After reading the report, Roth said hesitantly, "Brother, but Mr. Shui." "Don't bother about that damned Mr. Shui," Sith said angrily. "The only person we can rely on now is the Duke of St. Hilda." But Roth still seemed to have some doubts. "Brother, it's not like 300 years ago. Who should we choose between the 2 of them? Don't tell me you still can't see it clearly?" After a long while, Roth seemed to have been convinced by his brother. He nodded. "All right. Then what do you think we should do?" "Make the arrangements. I want to see the Duke of Loot. You actually dare to come and see me?" The Duke of Loot looked at Sith and sneered. Sith's expression was indifferent as he asked, "Duke, don't you dare to meet me at this time as well?" The Duke of Loot chuckled. "How do you know that I didn't agree to meet you just to lure you out? You should know that Prince William is looking for you all over the city." "Then do you know why His Highness is looking for me?" "I heard that it's because of tax evasion by the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce." "Do you believe this reason?" "Of course not. What do you think is the reason?" The Duke of Loot sneered and said confidently, "I think it's because of Queen Aisha." "Oh," Sith rolled his eyes. "How much do you know about me and Her Highness Queen Consort?" "Hee, in the name of cultivating blood roses for the Queen, I'm afraid you've done a lot of things." The Duke of Loot revealed a smile that all men understood. "You're really lucky. Queen Aisha, that beautiful rose, actually took a fancy to a lowly commoner like you." Sith was stunned. He originally thought that his secret with Queen Aisha had been seen through by the Duke of Loot, but he didn't expect. "Ha ha ha. Your Excellency the Duke, your eyes are truly sharp." The Duke of Loot had a complacent look as he snorted. "In the palace, there aren't many things that can be hidden from my eyes." Right. Sith suppressed his laughter. "Then are you going to capture me and bring me to His Majesty?" "That'll depend on your performance." The Duke of Loot smiled. "Although your Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce has been seized, I believe that you must have your own little treasury. So you want money? Also," the Duke of Loot's eyes flashed with a lustful light, "you've been with Queen Aisha for so long. You must have something on her, right? Give it to me. Then, you can use it to blackmail Queen Aisha and get close to her?" Sith's eyes were a little strange. The Duke of Loot snorted, as if silently agreeing. Sith couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and sighed. "Duke, you misunderstand. Queen Aisha and I don't have that kind of relationship. However, if you really want to get close to her, I might be able to help you." The Duke of Loot felt that Sith was just being stubborn, but when he heard the last part, he couldn't help but ask, "How can you help?" "I can help you attack the palace. When that happens, all the half-elf beauties in the palace, including Queen Aisha, will be yours." The Duke of Loot glared at him and said angrily, "Are you playing with me?" "I'm serious, Duke." Sith put his hand on his chest and bowed with a serious face. "Ha, you lowly commoner. You dare to play with a noble. Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Faced with the Duke of Loot's threat, Sith actually laughed. "Duke, I'm not a lowly commoner." "What did you say?" "My surname is Savoy." Savoy? Savoy." The Duke of Loot stood up from his seat and looked at Sith in disbelief. Sith also straightened his chest and met the Duke of Loot's gaze without backing down. Then, in order to make the Duke of Loot believe his identity, Sith took out an intricate badge. Golden Winged Sparrow. The moment the Duke of Loot saw the badge, he finally confirmed Sith's true identity. He really was the descendant of the previous royal family of the Half-Elf Kingdom, the Golden Winged Sparrow Savoy family. No wonder Prince William wanted to capture you so badly. The Duke of Loot suddenly realized. Duke, now you know that I wasn't lying when I asked you to attack the palace with me. Humph. Are you crazy? So what if you're from the Savoy family? Do you think that this is 300 years ago? Do you think that just by revealing your identity, you can make me obey your orders? Wake up. The current royal family of the half-elves is the House of Medea. Sith also laughed. Duke, if you don't do as I say, do you think that the records of our previous interactions will be sent to His Majesty? The Duke of Lute panicked, but he still tried to act tough. Will His Majesty believe you? Why not? Do you know that I have a habit of keeping records? I have a detailed record of every bribe that I have given you in the past. Not only you, but also your clansmen and your loyal subordinates. Maybe you don't realize it, but our Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce has already been deeply entangled with your Lute family. Normally, it wouldn't be a big deal, but at this sensitive time, do you think His Majesty will believe in your innocence? Or would he rather kill the wrong person than let you go? The Duke of Lute broke out in cold sweat. Because he knew his brother-in-law too well. He was a cold-blooded and merciless political animal. Once he knew that the relationship between the Lute family and the Savoy family was unclear, the old king would not hesitate to raise his butcher's knife. After a long while, the Duke of Lute said bitterly, "What is your plan?" The corners of Sith's mouth rose slightly, revealing a bloodthirsty smile. Chapter 120. Kathy, who was dressed in a black maid uniform, walked into the room and placed the lunch in front of Colin. Of course, there was also deer blood wine for every meal. After the food was placed on the table, Kathy did not leave as usual. Instead, she stood beside the round table with her hands behind her back. Colin picked up the deer blood wine and poured himself a cup. After taking a sip, he asked Kathy, "What's the matter? What's wrong? Is there any news?" Kathy nodded. "Yes, Sir Viscounts. Your family's army is now at the south gate of Silvermoon City." "Okay, I got it." Colin nodded and continued to drink. Kathy still did not leave. She hesitated for a moment before she said, "Sir, tomorrow night at the Half-Elven Palace, it will be a little dangerous. When the time comes, you can take Miss Vera's body and leave this place temporarily." Colin raised his head and looked at the little maid before he smiled. "I did not expect you to be so considerate of my safety. This is what I should do." "Is that so?" Colin put down the wine glass and grabbed the little maid's collar before he pulled her in front of him. Kathy screamed, but she quickly shut her mouth. Colin smiled coldly. "Do I look like a fool to you?" Kathy quickly shook her head. "Then how dare you use me like this?" Colin's tone was as cold as ice, causing the little maid to tremble in fear. I did not." "You did not?" Colin sneered. "You used the excuse of my safety to ask me to take Vera's body out of the palace. You wanted me to be your bait to attract the attention of the Silvermoon guards. How dare you play such a small trick in front of me?" "Kathy Savoy, listen to me carefully. You can either tell me your overall plan, and I will consider cooperating with you. Otherwise, I will go and look for the old king. I am sure he will be happy to arrange a large number of troops in the palace and wait for you to walk right into his trap." I will talk. I will talk." Kathy was a little girl, and she was no match for Colin. She was so scared that she almost cried. Only then did Colin let go of Kathy's collar, picked up the wine glass again, and drank while listening. "Sir Viscounts, the Savoy family has already made the Duke of Lute rebel. However, although the Duke is the commander of the Silvermoon Guards, in fact, he only has absolute control over 2 regiments with a total of 12,000 people. As for the other 3 regiments of the Silvermoon Guards, a total of 18,000 people, they were firmly controlled by the Modwin family. Although we do not have the advantage in terms of numbers, we are still in the dark while the enemy is in the light. If we launch a sudden attack, as long as we successfully attack the palace before the enemy can react and control the old king and Prince William, the House of Medea will not be able to do anything. Therefore, in order to make this plan go smoothly, we hope that you can cooperate with us." Colin rubbed his chin as he silently judged the feasibility of the Savoy family's plan. "So, you hope that I can take Vera's body and leave the palace, so that I can help you take some of the firepower from the House of Medea?" Kathy looked at Colin's face and said carefully, "Yes. After you leave the palace, you can go all the way to the south of the city. I am sure that the army outside the south gate will be there to meet you." Colin smiled and said, "Tell me the deployment of your troops and the route of your attack on the palace." Kathy had a difficult expression on her face as she said, "This? I don't know about this." Colin rolled his eyes and said, "Then you can ask Sith for it. Without this, don't expect me to cooperate with you." Kathy gritted her teeth and nodded. "Okay, I will help you ask him now." After that, she hurriedly left. Crack. The coffin lid opened and Vera poked her head out. "Colin, are we really leaving the palace tomorrow night?" "Why? Don't you want to leave?" Vera nodded quickly. "Yes. I can't even change my clothes in here. It is so annoying." "That's good. Don't worry. I will arrange everything." "Okay, I trust you." There was probably nothing that could stimulate a man's protective instincts more than a girl who trusted him wholeheartedly. Colin had a warm smile on his face as he called out to Vera, "Come on, let's eat." The sun set in the west and rose in the east. It was a new day. According to the original plan, today was supposed to be a joyous day. Prince Tup and Miss Vera were getting married today. However, the entire Silvermoon City was shrouded in an extremely depressing atmosphere today. Some people were quietly waiting for the judgment of fate, some were eager to fight, and some were ignorant and thought that this was just a normal day. Knock, knock, knock. "Come in." The Knights of Telda pushed the door open and entered the room. They first bowed solemnly to the coffin placed in the middle of the room, before bowing slightly to Colin. "Lord Viscounts, are you looking for me?" Colin waved at the Knights of Telda, and waited for them to come closer, before he handed them a roll of parchment. "What is this?" The Knights of Telda looked at the map of the palace with the deployment of the troops and the attack routes. They were suddenly puzzled. "Do you know the Savoy family?" "Yes. They used to be the half-elf royal family." "Well, this family is preparing to launch a coup tonight. The map in your hand is the specific arrangement for their attack on the palace." The Knights of Telda was stunned. They did not ask Colin how he had obtained such a confidential map. Instead, they shouted with red eyes, "My lord, are we going to take this opportunity to avenge Miss Vera?" Colin frowned and asked, "Knights of Telda, have you forgotten your biggest responsibility?" The Knights of Telda finally calmed down and bowed their heads. "I am sorry, Lord Viscounts. I was too impulsive. I should have prioritized protecting Miss Vera's body." Colin nodded. "Well, it is good that you understand. The palace is not safe tonight. We cannot continue to stay here. So we will rush out of the palace after the Savoy family launches the coup." "What about after we rush out of the palace? Which direction should we go out of the city?" "My family's army is now outside the south gate." "Okay, I understand." Colin shook his head slowly. "No, you don't understand." The Knights of Telda were stunned and looked at Colin in confusion. "My family's army is outside the south gate. The House of Medea and the Savoy family will of course think that we will run in the direction of the south gate. So, we must not go to the south gate." The Knights of Telda finally reacted. "Then where should we go?" Colin stretched out his finger and pointed at the map. "We will go to the north gate." "Okay. I will go and prepare the army for tonight's operation. Be careful. Don't attract the attention of the Silvermoon guards." "Yes." Colin rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought as he watched the Knights of Telda disappear outside the door. However, he was not worried about tonight's operation. Instead, he was thinking about something else. Last time in Queen Consort's palace, Colin stole a lot of blood from the Knights of Telda while they were unconscious. However, the strange thing was that the blood did not help him to advance to the Fourth Order. However, he did feel that his body was heating up. So, it was not that the blood of the Knights of Telda did not have any effect. It should be that the dosage was not enough. In fact, this was one of the reasons why Colin had to instigate this coup. In addition to creating chaos, so that he could take advantage of the chaos to take control of the half-elf kingdom, he also hoped to find the blood of high-level knights in this coup. This should not be difficult. After all, tonight was destined to be a night of bloodshed. Chapter 121. The night was as cold as water, and the silver moon was like a knife. When a dazzling arcane missile pierced the dark night sky, the half-elven palace was instantly in an uproar. If one were to look down from the sky, they would see that the Silver Moon Guards, who were originally guarding the east and south gates of the palace, had suddenly turned their spearheads and charged towards the interior of the palace. Under the sudden attack, the two teams did not encounter too many obstacles at all. They were like two fire dragons that rushed out of the inner court of the palace. Here, they finally encountered the organized and tenacious resistance of the guards stationed there. Woo! The harsh sound of the horn echoed above the palace, instantly awakening the entire Silvermoon City. This city of flowers, which was known to have never been captured, could not escape the disaster of the sword. Bang! Colin pushed open the door of the hall, carried the huge coffin and strode out. At this time, 1,000 guards of the House of St. Hilda had already gathered under the command of the Knights of Telda. Colin glanced around the crowd and said loudly, "Tonight, our only mission is to protect Miss Vera. Protect Miss Vera. Protect Miss Vera." The guards knocked heavily on the armor in front of their chests, and the sound waves reverberated through the sky. Kill. Under Colin's command, the 1,000-man team immediately rushed towards the south gate of the palace. As the Silvermoon Guards in this direction had already betrayed them, they did not encounter much resistance along the way. However, after exiting the palace gate, they met a half-elf guard who had come to support the palace. Due to the lag in the transmission of information, the Silvermoon Guards on the opposite side did not know what was going on in the palace. They only rushed over when they heard the bugle call for help. At this time, when they met the guards of the House of St. Hilda, who were full of murderous intent, they naturally thought that the bugle call was for them, so they decisively drew their swords. Kill. The Knights of Telda roared and led the charge. Although the half-elves had the advantage in numbers, their race was not good at fighting. The so-called Silvermoon Guard was just for show, and had not experienced many cruel battles. How could they compare to the army of the North, which had fought their way out of a war of blood and fire? Moreover, because of Vera's death, St. Hilda's bodyguards could be considered as a mourning army. They had long wanted to cause a bloody storm in Silvermoon City, but they had been suppressed by Colin. Now that Colin had completely let go of the wild beast's noose, the guards of the House of St. Hilda, who were already prepared to die, immediately charged towards the half-elf guards like crazy. As a result, the battle was extremely intense from the beginning. The narrow palace gate instantly turned into a meat grinder. Colin did not participate in the battle. Instead, he stood at the back with the coffin and observed the situation. At the same time, he was constantly looking for the existence of high-level knights among the half-elf soldiers. According to the information provided by Kathy, there were no 5th grade knights in the half-elf kingdom. The highest was only 4th grade. 4th grade was not high. In fact, compared to 3rd grade, 4th grade was qualitatively different. The professions in this world could be divided into 9 grades according to their strength, but every 3 grades was actually a big step. For example, after breaking through 6th grade, one would step into the sanctuary realm. Legend had it that if one broke through 9th grade, one would become a god. Similarly, after breaking through 3rd grade, one would be called a transcendent. At that time, the profession's strength would also undergo a qualitative change. From this name, it could be seen that professions above 3rd grade were no longer considered mortals. Before 3rd grade, there was a slight possibility of challenging someone above their level. However, once they entered 4th grade, there was basically no such thing as a miracle. For mortals below 4th grade, if they wanted to kill a transcendent, there was only one way: using human lives. Professions above 4th grade were not gods. Their energy and strength would also be exhausted. As long as they used human lives to wear down their battle strength, they would naturally be able to win. It was because of this that when Colin discovered that he had secretly drunk the blood of the Knights of Telda, but had not advanced to 4th grade, he was not too surprised. If he wanted to break through to the next stage, he would probably need even more HP. However, after looking around, Colin discovered that there were no 4th grade knights among the half-elf guards in front of him. However, just as Colin was feeling a little disappointed, he suddenly instinctively felt a threat. Without thinking carefully, He hurriedly threw the coffin in his hand forward and rolled on the ground. Kaboom! In an instant, there was a loud sound. The ground where Colin was originally standing was actually blasted open by a golden light. Following that, a huge white figure wearing thick and tight armor, holding a shield in his left hand and a spear in his right hand, charged towards Colin like a tank. Bang, bang, bang. In the midst of the loud footsteps, the earth seemed to tremble. Colin turned back to look and was instantly scared pale. The other party's beast-like figure completely enveloped him. Without thinking, Colin backhanded his sword and stabbed towards the gap in the armored knight's neck. Clang, the blade of judgment was casually swatted away. Colin was instantly sent flying by the huge force from the sword, crashing heavily into the wall beside the palace gate. However, he did not seem to be seriously injured. He got up without saying anything and ran in the direction of the Knights of Telda. As expected, the difference between 4th grade and 3rd grade was too great. There was no way to fight this battle. Colin ran at full speed, but the armored knight behind him was not slow either. Furthermore, he seemed to know Colin's identity and understood the principle of capturing the ringleader first. He was determined to chase after Colin. Along the way, the guards of the House of St. Hilda hurriedly tried to rescue Colin, but they were all swatted away by the half-elf armored knight like flies. Finally, the Knights of Telda also noticed the situation on Colin's side. They hurriedly abandoned the enemy in front of them and prepared to turn back to rescue him. The half-elf armored knight seemed to have realized that something was wrong and stomped on the ground with both feet. Asterisk boom. Asterisk, the ground instantly exploded, and gravel and dirt flew everywhere. The half-elf armored knight turned into a ray of golden light and crashed directly into Colin's back. Asterisk poo. Asterisk, Colin felt as if he had been hit by a truck, and he spat out blood. Ding! A spear was pressed against Colin's breastplate. The half-elf armored knight took off his mask, revealing a square and dignified face. Sir Viscount Angley, please ask your subordinates to stop resisting. The House of Medea has no intention to... *tch. A dagger pierced through the gap in the armor and into the side of the half-elf armored knight's waist. He cried out in pain and roared, "You don't know what's good for you." Seeing that Colin did not stop and still wanted to resist, the half-elf armored knight no longer hesitated. The spear in his hand pressed down and pierced through Colin's chest. Sir Viscounts, the Knights of Telda saw this scene and roared as they rushed over. The half-elf armored knight was prepared to break away from Colin and face the Knights of Telda. But he realized that the supposedly dead Viscount Angley under him was suddenly laughing and hugging him. The half-elf armored knight was scared out of his wits. He twisted the spear in his hand like a madman, and at the same time tried to break free from Colin's embrace. However, Colin's hands held on tightly to the half-elf armored knight. "Come on, play with your life." Chapter 122. Bang! Due to the huge gap in strength, Colin was still thrown to the ground by the half-elf knight. However, because of this moment of delay, he did not have time to deal with the Knights of Telda, who were rushing up from behind. Chi! A golden light flashed, and a huge bloody wound that was 1/2 meter long appeared on the back of the half-elf knight. His whole body was almost split in half. "Ah!" He roared and threw the spear in his hand, trying to force the Knights of Telda to retreat. After that, he turned around and ran away. Unfortunately, the guards of the House of St. Hilda had already surrounded him and blocked his way. In the end, the half-elf knight was still stabbed in the forehead by the Knights of Telda, who caught up with him. He knelt down and died. After his death, the half-elf guards who were already at a disadvantage suddenly lost their will to fight and ran away in an instant. Lord Viscounts, are you okay?" The Knights of Telda looked at the bloody wound on Colin's chest, and their eyes were gloomy. At this time, Colin was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat. However, he still raised his hand and pointed at the coffin on the ground. He said weakly, "Protect Miss Vera out of the city." The Knights of Telda's eyes instantly turned red. They knelt down on one knee and solemnly swore, "Don't worry. I will definitely send Miss Vera's body out of the city, even if the price is my life." Colin seemed to have finally gotten what he wanted. He closed his eyes and kicked his legs. There was no sound. The Knights of Telda and all the soldiers present solemnly bowed to Colin. After that, they lifted the coffin and continued on their way. After everyone left, the battlefield returned to its original calm state. Occasionally, some passers-by would pass by. However, after seeing the tragic situation here, they would stay away. They could not stand the strong smell of blood at all. Under the light of the silver moon, one of the corpses in the pile suddenly moved. Then, the resurrected corpse slowly crawled towards the corpse of the half-elf knight. Gulp! Gulp! A bone-chilling sucking sound rang out quietly, sounding especially eerie and strange in this hellish battlefield. A few foraging black crows landed, but they immediately flapped their wings and flew away quickly, as if there was something extremely terrifying here. Colin was still sucking the blood of the Class 4 half-elf knight. As he absorbed more and more blood, Colin was pleasantly surprised to find that his body was once again showing signs of heat. Moreover, the fever seemed to be particularly obvious this time. It could even be said that it came fiercely, causing him to sweat all over. At the same time, a strong sense of hunger enveloped Colin, making him unable to stop sucking. The half-elf knight's corpse was shriveling at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was likely that he would soon be sucked dry. Colin's stomach quickly swelled, but he still had no intention of stopping. Because he was hungry. The intense spiritual hunger and the increasingly obvious physical satiety were extremely contradictory, but they existed at the same time. Finally, the half-elf knight's corpse was completely shriveled, and not a single drop of blood could be squeezed out. Colin raised his head and heaved a long sigh towards the sky. The heat in his body made him close his eyes comfortably, as if he was enjoying the wonderful feeling of his strength increasing crazily. But soon this comfortable and wonderful feeling disappeared. Colin was shocked to find that the blood in his body was crazily circulating and boiling. Hum! A strange vibrating sound came from Colin's body, as if hundreds of bees were letting out ear-piercing cries. This vibrating sound gradually became unified, and the pitch was also changing. In the end, it finally became a sound similar to a bell. Dang, dang, dang. At this moment, Colin was like a cooked lobster. His skin was flushed red, and it was even covered with small red dots, as if the excessive blood in his body was trying to seep out. Thump! Colin's heart that had long stopped beating actually started beating again. He could not help but clutch his chest. Because the beating just now was so loud, he almost cried out in pain. Thump! Another beat. Ah! Colin finally could not help but let out a low roar. At the same time he was puzzled. What was going on with him? Was the reaction to advancing to rank 4 so big? Thump! 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 His heart seemed to have suddenly been rejuvenated, beating faster and faster. Colin let out a low roar, no longer caring about what was going on, and no longer suppressing the changes in his body. With the sudden recovery of his heart, the blood in Colin's body started to boil even more violently. The muscles all over his body started to expand due to the blood rush, and even started to be covered with a layer of blood-red lines. It was like some kind of scale armor, full of a mysterious aura. The rising blood pressure made all the blood vessels in Colin's body slowly bulge, like purple steel ropes wrapping around his body. The immense pain made Colin's eyes widen, and his body tremble. Large amounts of sweat seeped out, but it was quickly evaporated by the high temperature on the surface of his body. Thump! Under the intense pain, Colin fiercely punched the ground. His blue veins bulged on his fist as it collided with the ground. Invisible ripples that seemed to have materialized splashed out and spread toward Western Zhou. The ground instantly caved in, revealing a clear fist imprint. Ah! 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 Colin began to throw punches, leaving fist imprints of various sizes on the ground. Large amounts of shock waves spread along the ground, like a small earthquake. Thump, thump, thump. Colin's heart beat faster and faster, like a powerful pump that did not know fatigue, once again taking over Colin's blood circulation and pushing it to a terrifying state. Waves of crazily flowing blood rampaged through Colin's body, as if looking for a vent. Colin's body, under the stimulation of the crazily surging blood, actually began to expand. The original armor could not withstand the expansion of the body, and was torn apart. Colin's mind was now in a daze. The whole world in front of him had been covered by a layer of blood-red gauze, especially the curved silver moon, which was now bright red, as if it was going to drip blood. Countless blood mists floated up from the surrounding corpses and gathered around Colin's body. Clang! After a dull sound of a bell, the whole world seemed to have quieted down. Colin bent his waist, trembling constantly, as if something was constantly trying to struggle out of his body. Thump! Colin struck the ground one last time, and then quieted down. At this time, his eyes had completely turned scarlet, and there was not a trace of human emotion in them. His exposed skin was covered with mysterious blood-red patterns, and on his back, the muscles there were bulging like two protruding horns. Gee! The horns bulged, and a pair of black bat wings broke out of his body. The bat wings slowly spread out, extending more than 10 meters to both sides. Colin stood up. At this time, he had turned into a 4-meter-tall giant. The huge bat wings flapped behind him, and a gust of wind swept up. Facing the blood moon in the sky, Colin bared his sharp canine teeth, and suddenly let out a soundless roar. Chapter 123. Outside the south gate of Silvermoon City, when the rebel army began to attack the palace, the Knight of Rigo heard the sounds of fighting coming from the city. Therefore, the loyal knight of the Angeli family did not hesitate to summon the army. Brothers, something has happened in Silvermoon City. Our Grand Duke is still trapped in the city, and is facing great danger. So, do you dare to fight with me into the city and rescue our Grand Duke and Miss Vera? Fight into the city! Fight into the city! Fight into the city! The army that the Knight of Rigo brought was basically made up of the veterans of the Angeli family. Therefore, there was no doubt about their loyalty. Moreover, in the face of the legendary weak half-elves, these proud soldiers of the northern frontier would not take the initiative to retreat. That would be too embarrassing. Kill! With a roar, the Knight of Rigo took the lead and rushed towards Silvermoon City. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The half-elven guards on the tower immediately sounded the alarm. Whoosh! The arrows fell sparsely, and did not cause much damage to the attackers outside the city. The Knight of Rigo, who was rushing at the front, did not stop. He, who was wearing armor that covered his whole body, looked like an angry bear at this time. His heavy footsteps left a clear and visible mark on the ground. He rushed faster and faster, until he was almost like a golden lightning. Bang! Just like that, the beautiful Crystal City gate was smashed into smithereens by him. Nightleg rushed into the city, and knocked away a few half-elf guards who didn't care about their lives. He roared, "Let's go! Who dares to stop me?" Half-Elven Palace Main Hall. The fierce sound of fighting and the strong smell of blood constantly came from outside the hall, making people feel uneasy. The old king sat high on the throne, not saying a word, his eyes deep and serene. Prince William quickly walked in from outside the hall with blood and traces of fighting on his body. "Your Majesty, the situation outside has basically been confirmed. The rebels are under the banner of the Savoy family, and they're participating in 2 regiments of the Silvermoon Guard, and they're under the control of my uncle, the Duke of Lute." As expected, it was the Savoy. The old king's face was filled with helplessness. "I knew that they were still hiding in some corner of Silverymoon City. That was why I pretended to be dying of old age to lure them out. Hee, I didn't expect this. They actually chose such a time to jump out. Your Majesty, what should we do now?" The old king fell silent for a moment before asking, "Where are the people from the northern frontier now?" When the rebel army charged in, they took the opportunity to rush out of the palace. "Send someone to find them immediately." Prince William was a little puzzled. "Your Majesty, why do we still care about these northern frontier people at a time like this? Even if they successfully rush out of Silverymoon City, it won't be a big deal, right?" The old king gloomily stared at his son and said angrily, "If they fall into the hands of the rebel army, or if Vera's body is desecrated by the rebel army, then even if we successfully quell this rebellion, do you think the Duke of St. Hilda will let the House of Medea go?" Prince William immediately broke out in cold sweat, and quickly nodded. "Yes, I'll arrange it now. Wait, The old king stopped his son. Do you know which direction they ran in? Prince William shook his head. I don't know, but I'll send someone to search the city. Search my ass. Can you spare so many people now? What about the rebel army in the palace? Prince William opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. The old king sighed and pointed out. Didn't the Angeli family's army just arrive outside Silvery Moon City a few days ago? Which direction are they in? Yes. Prince William suddenly understood. They are outside the South Gate. So, those people from the northern frontier must be running in the direction of the South Gate. No, if they are smart, they will definitely not run in the direction of the South Gate. So send someone to chase them in the opposite direction and go to the North Gate. Prince William was stunned for a while before he recovered and nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. I'll arrange it now. On the other hand, the Knights of Telda were carrying Vera's body all the way to the north. Along the way, they encountered several waves of Silvermoon guards who tried to stop them, but they were all defeated. However, after a series of battles, the House of St. Hilda's guards had also suffered heavy losses. Originally, there were 1,000 guards, but now, only half of them were left, and almost all of them were injured. However, their eyes were still determined, as if no one could stop them from moving forward. Knights of Telda, please wait. Another wave of Silvermoon guards blocked their way. The leading half-elf knight lifted his helmet and persuaded sincerely. His Majesty the King is worried about the safety of Miss Vera's body, and he does not want any of you to be hurt again. So please follow me back to the palace. I can guarantee that no one will be disturbed. The Knights of Telda were not moved at all. They sneered and said, You guarantee? What can you guarantee? Haha, go back and quell the rebellion first before you talk to me. Now the House of St. Hilda's guards only want to escort Miss Vera's body out of Silvermoon City. Let's see who dares to stop us. Knights of Telda, His Majesty the King really does not have any malicious intentions. Please believe us. No malicious intentions? The Knights of Telda sneered and interrupted. Then, why did you lock us in the palace and block us from contacting the outside world? The half-elf knight was suddenly speechless. The Knights of Telda obviously did not want to talk to the other party. They immediately pulled out their swords and shouted, Either you get out of the way, or we fight to the death. Make your choice. The half-elf knight looked dignified and did not answer. However, he did not move out of the way. The Knights of Telda obviously understood the other party's intention. They immediately shouted, Kill. They immediately took the lead and rushed forward. The two sides immediately engaged in a fierce battle. However, no matter how fierce the battle was, both sides deliberately avoided the place where Vera's coffin was placed. Obviously, the Silvermoon guards also understood the importance of the coffin. They were afraid that they would accidentally affect it during the battle. Therefore they stayed far away. However, just as the two sides were engaged in a fierce battle, a strong figure suddenly rushed out from the darkness. He was extremely fast, and without any hesitation, he rushed towards the coffin in the middle of the battlefield. The Knights of Telda, who had been paying attention to the coffin, immediately forced the opponent to retreat. He turned around and shouted, Quick! Stop him! His target is Miss Vera. The half-elf knight, who was fighting with the Knights of Telda, was also shocked at this time. He shouted almost at the same time, Stop him! The two knights who were originally fighting to the death chose to temporarily stop fighting at this time. They rushed towards the coffin in the middle of the battlefield. Unfortunately, they were still one step too late. The mysterious knight who suddenly appeared was like a charging tank. He knocked down all the soldiers who were blocking his way, and arrived in front of the coffin without any hindrance. Then, without any hesitation, the man decisively drew a golden semicircle with his sword and bombarded Vera's coffin. Bang! With a loud bang, the coffin was torn apart. Countless small wood chips flew everywhere. No! The Knights of Telda and the half-elf knight roared in despair at the same time. However, their expressions immediately froze on their faces. This was because there were only wood chips flying in the middle of the battlefield. There were no bones. That coffin, it was an empty coffin. The half-elf knight immediately reacted and scolded, We have been fooled. This is bait. The Knights of Telda also looked at the flying wood chips in a daze. It took them a long time to recover. Could this be Viscount Angley's plan? Then where is Miss Vera at this time? Chapter 125. At the half-elven palace. The massacre was still ongoing. The palace had turned into a sea of blood and fire. The sounds of killing and screams were intertwined to form a hellish sound. However, the side palace where Vera and Colin were originally staying was exceptionally quiet. Under the clear moonlight, a tall and thin figure suddenly appeared outside the side palace. Tap, tap, tap. Attracted by the sound of footsteps, a small head quietly poked out from a dark corner. The owner of the small head was none other than Vera. She clenched the staff in her hand and carefully watched the figure, who was walking in from outside the palace. When Vera saw the fox mask on the man's face, she walked out from the corner and asked softly, "Excuse me, are you the fox knight that Viscount Angley mentioned?" The fox knight did not speak. After a long time he nodded stiffly. Vera was relieved and asked again, "Are you the knight of the Angeli family? How should I address you?" The fox knight did not say a word. He just turned around and walked out. Vera was stunned. The other party's cold attitude made her feel a little confused. However, when she thought of Colin's instructions, she quickly followed the fox knight. "Excuse me, where are you taking me?" The fox knight remained silent. Vera pouted and completely gave up on communicating with him. She obediently followed the strange knight out. At this time, the rebel army was concentrating on attacking the inner court of the palace. Therefore, the outer court of the palace was unusually quiet. Occasionally, they could see the palace servants and maids running out in a panic. They were so busy running for their lives that they did not notice the abnormalities of Vera and the fox knight at all. Vera had already changed into the clothes of an ordinary maid. She also touched her face with blood. In such a dark night, it was really difficult to recognize her if one did not look carefully. The two of them walked all the way to the open-air garden in the inner court of the palace. The bloody roses here had already been destroyed by the king's grandson and replaced with other flowers and plants. "What are we doing here?" Vera finally could not help but ask. However, the fox knight still did not answer. Just as Vera was about to lose her patience with this strange man, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in the room. "Miss Vera, good evening." Vera raised her head and saw that Queen Aisha had also appeared in the garden. Good evening, Your Highness Queen Consort." "Miss Vera, I have been entrusted by Viscount Angley to escort you out of the palace." Vera was a little hesitant, because Colin didn't tell her what really happened in Queen Consort's palace on the day of the body examination. She always thought that it was Prince Tup who wanted to kill her. As Prince Tup's mother, Queen Aisha was obviously regarded as an untrustworthy person by Vera. Queen Aisha seemed to have expected that Vera would hesitate. Therefore, she took out a badge and showed it to Vera. "Roaring White Bear?" Vera recognized the badge of the Angeli family at a glance. She no longer doubted Queen Aisha. "Do you believe me now? Hurry up and follow me. The palace is not safe." "Okay." However, just as Vera was about to leave with Queen Aisha, a team of half-elf guards suddenly blocked the entrance of the garden. Queen Aisha saw the Silvermoon Guard badge on their bodies. Just as she was about to ask them to make way for her, she heard a familiar voice. "Miss Vera, Your Highness Queen Consort, where are you going?" "Sith." Queen Aisha frowned. "Why are you here?" "Then where should I be?" Sith laughed. "The Duke of Lute is in charge of attacking the palace. However, I have to carry out the orders of the Duke of St. Hilda. I have to kill Vera." Vera was stunned when she heard Sith's words. She had never expected that her adoptive father would want to kill her. What did you say? Father wants to kill me?" Sith looked at Vera with pity in his eyes before he said indifferently, "I am sorry, Miss Vera. I am just following orders." "No, that is impossible." Vera shook her head in a daze. Sith turned around and looked at Queen Aisha before he sneered. "Your Highness Queen Consort, when I found out that Miss Vera had died in the hands of Prince Tup, I knew that you did not carry out the plan that we had set up at the beginning. Therefore, as soon as I entered the palace, I had my eyes on you. Sure enough, you have really betrayed us." Queen Aisha also sneered. "Sith, Miss Vera is still alive. Do you still dare to kill her? Do you dare to stain your hands with the blood of a member of the House of St. Hilda? Sith laughed and said with a confident look on his face. Your Highness Queen Consort, Miss Vera had been killed by Prince Tup a long time ago. This is something that all half-elf nobles know about. How could I possibly be the one who killed her? But there are so many people here now. Can you guarantee that none of them will leak the secret? Queen Aisha was still trying to make a final effort. Sith looked around and chuckled. You don't have to worry about such a small problem. I will ask them to go up and kill each of them later. If this is not enough for them to keep the secret, hee. I am sure that they will be very interested in the bodies of the two great beauties. As soon as they heard this sentence, the guards around Sith started breathing heavily. Queen Aisha and Vera's faces instantly turned pale. Kill them. Sith waved his hand, and a group of half-elf guards slowly surrounded them. Clang! The Fox Knight was not afraid at all as he pulled out his long sword and stood in front of Vera. Vera also raised the staff in her hand and began to chant softly. Don't let her finish casting the spell. As soon as Sith shouted, the half-elf guards no longer hesitated and rushed forward decisively. Whoosh! At this time, a strong wind suddenly blew in the garden and the sky suddenly darkened. Queen Elsa raised her head in shock and saw a huge figure descending from the sky. A pair of huge black wings completely covered the moonlight, and half of the garden was shrouded in its shadow. Bang! The giant landed heavily on the ground and roared angrily at Sith and the others. A boundless and terrifying aura spread out, and everyone present could feel a tremor from the depths of their soul. You, what kind of monster are you? Sith's eyes were wide open, and his voice began to tremble. Colin's face was covered by a cloud of blood, and coupled with his huge body and black wings, it was no wonder that Sith could not recognize him. All of you must die. Colin roared and waved his huge arm that was covered with hard blood. Bang! 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 The half-elf guards in front of him hurriedly raised their shields, but they were still sent flying by the huge recoil. Sith saw that the situation was not good, and he was so scared that he turned around and ran away. Boom! Colin flapped his black wings, and a violent airflow instantly filled the entire garden. Under the support of this airflow, he seemed to have turned into a black arrow, and in the blink of an eye, he was already above Sith's head. Whoosh! A huge hand suddenly reached down and grabbed Sith's head. Kacha! Sith's head was twisted off on the spot like a bottle cap. Chapter 126. Brother, what's going on outside? In the prison, Anna could hear the faint sounds of killing outside, and could not help but ask. The Earl of Avon tilted his head, and listened for a while before he wondered. Did the army of the North arrive at Silvermoon City so soon? But then he shook his head and said, No. Even if the northern frontier immediately sent troops to the half-elf kingdom after receiving the news of Vera's death, it has only been a few days, and they would not be able to reach Silvermoon City. At this time, the heavy iron gate of the prison suddenly opened from the outside. Earl, Miss Anna, please forgive me for being late. Looking at the half-elf knight outside the iron gate, the Earl of Avon smiled and nodded. Knight Omar, you came at the right time. Anna looked at the half-elf knight who was bowing to her brother, and suddenly realized that this was probably the house of Saint Prospero's spy in the half-elf kingdom. Knight Omar, can you tell us what happened outside? Of course, Miss Anna. The former half-elf royal family, the Savoy family, has launched a coup. They have instigated the Duke of Lute and a group of Silvermoon guards. At this time, they are attacking the inner court of the palace. It was because of this that I had the opportunity to sneak into the prison and release the two of you. The Savoy family? The Earl of Avon touched his chin and had a strange smile on his face. They really chose a good time to launch a coup. Brother, don't think too much. Let's leave this damn place quickly. Anna urged. Okay, let's go. The three of them quickly left the prison and did not encounter many obstacles along the way. At this time, the House of Medea was already busy with their own affairs, and they certainly would not place a heavy guard in the prison. What is that? When the three of them passed by the royal garden, Anna suddenly pointed at the tall figure in the distance and asked. At this time, Colin was like a whirlwind of death, constantly reaping the lives of the half-elf guards who gathered in the royal garden. The Earl of Avon watched for a while and wondered, why does this guy have wings? Is he an elven druid? But didn't the druids go extinct long ago? Anna retorted, it's just a legend. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Who knows if they secretly left behind their legacies? Earl Miss Anna, Queen Aisha seems to be there too. A sharp-eyed half-elf knight suddenly reminded. Queen Aisha? The Earl of Avon was suddenly interested. Let's go and take a look. Devil, he's a devil. Run. At this time, the half-elf guards in the garden had long been scared out of their wits by Colin's slaughter, and were fleeing like a swarm of bees. Bang! Bang! Colin chased after him with heavy steps. Coupled with his huge body and extended black wings, it was really like an eagle chasing after a chick. When the chicks had all scattered, the Earl of Avon and the other two appeared. Looking into Colin's scarlet eyes, Anna could not help but blurt out, what kind of monster are you? You're the freaking monster, Colin roared. In an instant he stomped on the ground and flapped his wings. His whole body was like a sharp arrow leaving the bow as he rushed towards Anna. Boom! It was as if a bomb had fallen at the place where Anna had been standing. Countless small pieces of stone flew everywhere. When the dust settled, a huge pit of 2 meters deep could be seen. Anna had already dodged to the side. Although she was holding a huge broadsword in her hand, her body was unexpectedly agile and vigorous. She looked like a butterfly as she moved, which made her look unbalanced and strangely beautiful. Under the stimulation of the holy light, the complicated patterns on the surface of the broadsword began to flicker with dazzling electric light. It was as if there were electric snakes winding around the sword, emitting an extremely dangerous aura. With a hiss, Anna's entire body seemed to have transformed into a silver lightning bolt, and suddenly shot towards Colin. Colin narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. He abruptly clenched his fist and gathered all the blood chi around him into his fist, forming an unparalleled fist wind, and striking out. Clang! When the fist and the sword met, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. A huge invisible force suddenly erupted, setting off a terrifying wave of air that spread out in all directions. CICICI! Bolts of silver lightning shot out from the broadsword like giant pythons, following Colin's fist and quickly climbing up his entire body. Colin only felt waves of numbness, causing the strength in his body to dissipate extremely quickly. Scram! Colin roared. His other hand shot out like a viper towards Anna's face. Anna nimbly dodged and dodged the attack once again. Boom! Colin smashed a large hole in the ground, sending rubble flying everywhere. Colin was unforgiving. He chased after Anna, constantly punching. Bang! 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 For a moment, it was as if he had turned into a demolition machine, smashing all the buildings near the royal garden beyond recognition. Anna could only retreat step by step, looking rather wretched. Miss Anna, I'll help you. Knight Omar roared when he saw the situation. He placed a giant kite shield that was almost as tall as him in front of him, and suddenly exerted strength with his feet. Bang! The ground immediately caved in, and Knight Omar used the recoil to quickly charge at Colin. Bang! 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 He charged faster and faster, his footsteps heavier and heavier, and the imprints on the ground became deeper and deeper. By the time he arrived in front of Colin, his entire body had already turned into a golden light. Colin suddenly turned around and punched at Knight Omar's kite shield. Rumble! The fist and the kite shield fiercely collided, bursting out with a loud sound. Such a terrifying head-on collision made Colin unable to help but take 2 steps back before he could stabilize himself. However, Knight Omar was even worse. The kite shield in his hand was completely broken, and a large number of broken pieces of the shield flew in all directions. He was directly sent flying by this terrifying force, crashing into the wall behind him. Pfft! Knight Omar spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was filled with shock. Just as Colin was about to deal with this soft persimmon, Anna rushed up from behind him. Clang! This time, Colin turned around and clamped the other party's broadsword with both hands. The difference in strength made it impossible for Anna to pull out her weapon, but she did not seem to care, and let go of the sword hilt. Her small body suddenly lifted up, and she actually soared into the air along with the broadsword. Whoosh! She actually pulled out 2 short swords from her waist and stabbed straight at Colin's eyes. Colin took a deep breath and suddenly opened his mouth. Roar! The deafening roar caused Anna's body to stop. Colin took the opportunity to let go of the broadsword and quickly reached out with his right hand, just in time to grab Anna, who was unable to dodge in midair. Ha! Caught you, little guy! Anna's slender waist was tightly grabbed by Colin with one hand, but she still threw the 2 short swords in her hands at Colin's head. Colin sneered and was about to dodge to the side. But at this moment, a pitch-black smoke suddenly enveloped his head, making him unable to move at all. Chi! The 2 short swords stabbed into Colin's head, as if they had grown 2 horns. Chapter 127. Is she dead? The Earl of Avon put away his staff and asked with a sigh of relief. The second son of the House of St. Prospero was also a mage. However, Anna's face was still serious. She felt that the giant hand holding her waist did not show any signs of loosening. Just as she was about to tell her brother to be careful, the black wings on the giant's back suddenly spread out. The complicated and mysterious blood patterns on his body suddenly emitted a scarlet light, as if some ancient spell formation had been activated at this moment. Ah! Anna screamed in pain because Colin's giant hand did not loosen, but tightened instead. Kacha! Anna found that more than half of her ribs were broken. Wait! Please wait! The Earl of Avon saw that the situation was not good and quickly shouted. We are the direct descendants of the House of St. Prospero. Sir, you don't want to be stained with the blood of the Holy Knight family members, do you? Kacha! Anna screamed again, as a few more of her ribs were broken. Obviously, the name of the House of St. Prospero was useless. Don't. The Earl of Avon clasped his hands. We really don't mean to be enemies with you. What will it take for you to let my sister go? Please tell us. Colin stopped squeezing and used his other hand to pull out the short sword from his head while asking, What can you give me? The Earl of Avon saw that Leyland pulled out the short sword from his head, as if nothing had happened, and cursed him in his heart. However, he said with incomparable sincerity, How about I tell you a secret in exchange for my sister's life? Tell me. You should be a powerful druid, right? Colin did not answer. The Earl of Avon smiled and continued. I know where the legendary sacred item of the druids, the wild heart, is. I wonder if this secret is enough to exchange for my sister's life? Druid? Colin was stunned. He didn't expect to be mistaken for a druid in his transformed state. Druid was an exclusive profession of the elves, but it had already died out 10,000 years ago. Even the elves who had retreated to the Radiant Moon Forest no longer had any inheritors of this profession. Legend had it that druids could imitate the forms of various animals and obtain some of the animal's characteristics and powers. Therefore, the pair of bat wings on Colin's back made the other party mistake him for a druid. Colin suddenly felt that there was nothing wrong with this misunderstanding. It was better than treating him as a monster or a devil. Therefore, Colin pretended to be eager and asked, Then tell me, where is Wild Heart? The Earl of Avon coughed softly and said, It's in the arcane city, Yevil. Colin blinked and shook his head. How do I know that you are not lying to me? The Earl of Avon seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. He pointed at Vera, who was still hiding in the garden, and said loudly, You are Miss Vera. I am St. Prospero Evan. Do you still remember me? Colin raised his eyebrows. This Evan could recognize Vera at a glance. However, he quickly realized that this guy was also a mage. He must have seen Vera in Yevil before. Hello, Earl of Avon. Of course I remember you. Vera walked out timidly. Colin's huge and unusual body made her a little scared. Ha, it is really you. I didn't expect Miss Vera to still be alive. Haha, the situation in Silvermoon City is getting more and more interesting. Ah! Anna's scream interrupted the Earl of Avon. No. The Earl of Avon did not dare to delay any longer. He quickly asked Vera. Miss Vera, you should have heard of the Wild Heart in Yevil Tower, right? It is the treasure of the chairman of the Mage Council. Vera nodded. Yes. See, I did not lie to you. Can you let my sister go now? Colin shook his head. To be honest, this news was not useful to him at all. You want to exchange this news for your sister? It is not the real, wild heart. Haha. When did the lives of the direct descendants of the House of Saint Prospero become so worthless? When he heard Colin's words, the Earl of Avon nodded in agreement. Yes, yes. When did the House of Saint Prospero become so cheap? What else do you need? Just tell me. Colin looked at the other party's forthright appearance. He suddenly had the desire to rip off a dog-rich person. Do you have money? Money? The Earl of Avon was stunned. Apparently, he did not expect that the other party would ask for money directly. He reached into his pocket and said helplessly, I did not bring much money with me this time. I guess I only have a few hundred gold coins. Okay. Colin was ready to agree. In fact, he did not really intend to kill the woman of the House of Saint Prospero, because it would completely anger the eastern region. The House of Saint Prospero might even use this as an excuse to send troops to Silvermoon City. This would bring great changes to Colin's plan to control the half-elf kingdom. It was not a wise move to create more problems at this time. No. Unexpectedly, the Earl of Avon shook his head and said with a righteous face, A few hundred gold coins is not worthy of the identity of the House of Saint Prospero. Colin. Anna just wanted to punch her unreliable brother to death. How about this? I'll add this staff to the ransom for my sister. What do you think? Colin looked at the huge purple magic crystal embedded at the top of the staff and asked curiously, How much is this staff worth? Probably 100,000 gold coins. Colin's eyes widened. This was the first time he had seen such a prodigal dog. Okay, it's settled. Good. The Earl of Avon immediately threw the staff to Colin, as if he was not afraid that he would go back on his word. Seeing the other party's attitude, Colin didn't want to go back on his word, so he released Anna. Get out of Silvermoon City immediately. If I see the two of you in the city again, I'll twist your heads off. Okay, we'll leave now. The Earl of Avon helped his sister up and pulled Omar, who was paralyzed by the wall, and hurriedly left. After they left, Colin flapped his bat wings and instantly rose into the sky. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the dark night sky. Miss Vera, let's go quickly. Okay. Vera nodded, but she was a little puzzled. Why did that strange man help us? I don't know. Queen Aisha shook her head and lied. In fact, she had already perceived Colin's identity through the mysterious connection that originated from the depths of her bloodline. But she did not tell Vera. So, where are we going now? To the Miller family. The Miller family? Vera hesitated. Queen Aisha smiled and explained, You are now a life-saving straw for the Miller family. As long as you are alive and well, the Miller family will not have to bear the crime of killing you. So, they are now the people in Silvermoon City who do not want you to be hurt the most. Vera was relieved, but when she thought of Colin who had arranged everything, she could not help but ask, What about Colin? Where is he now? Viscount Angeli will join you soon, Lucian said. That's good. Chapter 128. At the north gate of the palace, 3 figures hurriedly walked out. All right, let's take a break. You two are too heavy, I can't help you. The Earl of Avon leaned his sister and Omar against the wall. Then he laid down and let out a long sigh. Why did you take the initiative to give the staff to that weirdo? Anna could not help but blame her brother. Such a precious staff, even for the House of Saint Prospero, was not something that could be casually discarded. A sly smile appeared on the Earl of Avon's face. That guy is obviously short of money, so after getting my staff, he will definitely find a merchant to exchange it for gold coins. In this way, there will definitely be clues left behind. We can follow the clues to find out which force this guy belongs to. If he is not careful enough, we can even directly find out his true identity. Anna came to a sudden realization. After a while she asked again, Do you really think he is a druid? Isn't he? I think he is more like a knight. A knight? The Earl of Avon sat up straight with a look of disbelief. Are you sure? Anna shook her head. I'm not too sure. However, the energy emitted from his body is indeed holy light, although it has a bloody smell. But it should be holy light without a doubt. Yes, Sir Earl, I also think that person is a knight. Omar, who was on the side, also interjected. The Earl of Avon really believed it this time. After all, the two knights who had fought with the other party believed that the other party was a knight, so it could not be wrong. A knight? If he is also a druid, then he can only be a half-elf to be able to have both professions. Then is he at the 5th step? The Earl of Avon knew that Anna and Omar were both at the 4th step, but they were beaten up so violently by the other party. So he guessed that the other party should be at the 5th step. Unexpectedly, Anna shook her head again. No. I have fought with the 5th step. I've fought with a 5th step knight before. And this guy's strength shouldn't have reached the 5th step yet. Then why were you beaten up so badly? Anna rolled her eyes and said helplessly. That guy's holy light energy isn't very strong, but it's very strange. It's as if it has some kind of indistinct control over the blood in my body. There were a few times when he disrupted the flow of my blood and chi, and I almost lost my breath. Moreover, this fellow's strength was extremely terrifying. He didn't look like a human at all. Instead, he looked like some kind of giant beast. Also, do you remember my last 2 strikes? I was pretty sure I was in his head. But maybe you put it in a crooked position? After all, his head was shrouded in a bloody mist. That's impossible, Anna said firmly. All right. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's hurry and leave Silvermoon City. If we get caught by that guy again, we'll be in big trouble. Then our mission. Earl of Avon rolled his eyes and said, My silly sister, you're still thinking about the quest? Our mission is definitely hopeless. But isn't Vera still alive? Doesn't that mean that we still have hope? Vera is still alive, which means that the other party's methods are much better than I thought. Earl of Avon shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, I was too careless during the last meeting with the king. That's why I was directly locked up by the damn House of Medea. Otherwise, I could still have played with this opponent. But now, the situation in Silvermoon City has been settled, and we are completely hopeless. Let's go, silly sister. The silver moon was high in the sky. Colin watched from afar as Vera and the other two were happily welcomed into the manor by the Miller family. Only then did he feel relieved and leave. Vera should be safe now. If the Miller family wanted to get rid of the misfortune of being exterminated, they had to protect Vera. In addition, Queen Aisha and the blood slave Cynthia were taking care of her, so there shouldn't be any more problems. As for Colin, he still needed to arrange a perfect ending for this coup. Whoosh whoosh, flapping his huge bat wings, Colin soon returned to the sky above the half-elven palace. At this time, the area around the inner court of the palace had completely turned into a hell on earth. Countless half-elves were as humble as ants, and they could disappear at any time in this political whirlpool. Blood and corpses had become a cruel scene in the palace, and the thick smell of blood filled the air, almost suffocating everyone. Witnessing all this, Colin could only feel the blood in his body getting colder and colder. It's time to end this farce, Colin muttered to himself, then flapped his bat wings and rushed down to the main hall of the inner court of the palace. What is that? A guard heard the sound of the wind above his head, and he looked up in surprise, then saw Colin's figure quickly passing by. Just as he was about to warn his superior, the figure had already turned into a black lightning, fell from the sky, and rushed into the main hall of the palace in an instant. Only then did the guards in front of the hall react. They never thought that the enemy would use such an unbelievable method to rush in. When they hurriedly rushed into the hall to protect the king, they found that the terrifying bat-winged giant was already standing in front of the old king. Prince William held his knight's sword and stood behind Colin, his voice trembling. You? Who are you? What do you want to do? Colin looked at the old king who was standing straight in front of him, and suddenly laughed. Your Majesty, I didn't expect your body to be so strong. The old king faced this strange person who suddenly rushed in, and did not panic. Instead, he calmly mocked himself. It's just a small trick, and I wanted to lure out the ambitious schemer as soon as possible. But I didn't expect. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I've already helped you take care of the rebel leader. Look, is this him? Colin held up Sith's bloody head in front of the old king. The old king was not afraid, and he stared at the head carefully, then smiled and nodded. That's right, it's the rat from the Savoy family. After hiding for so long, it's finally quiet. After that, he looked at Colin with a sincere face and said, Brave warrior, thank you for giving the Modwin family such a great gift. How can I repay you? Colin nodded. Yes, I do need a gift in return. Just say it. As long as the House of Medea has it, we will definitely not be stingy. Of course you have it. Colin laughed a little arrogantly. I want your head. What? The old king was shocked and thought that he had misheard. But Colin did not give him any time to react. His right hand shot out like lightning and pressed on the old king's head. Asterisk crack. Asterisk another bottle cap was unscrewed. Father, Your Majesty. The hall was suddenly in chaos. Prince William and the half-elf guards rushed towards Colin like crazy. But Colin spread out his large bat wings and flapped them forcefully. Asterisk boom. Asterisk violent air currents rushed through the hall, and Colin crashed through the roof and flew into the air. A silver moon outlined Colin's figure, and his large wings made him look like an angel who had descended to earth. But his voice was like that of a demon who would destroy the world. Your king is already dead. Run for your lives. Under the shocked gazes of the half-elves, 2 heads fell from the sky. Chapter 129. Asterisk thud. Thud. Asterisk the 2 heads that fell from the sky caused the fierce battlefield below to fall silent. Then the identities of the 2 heads were also recognized. It's the king. It's Sir Sith. The death of the king and the rebel leader caused panic to spread uncontrollably. Whether it was the Silvermoon Guard or the rebel army, they all began to think of one question. Since their boss is dead, what are we fighting for? At this time, if there were people of suitable status and reputation from both sides to stand out, they could stop the soldiers from panicking. But unfortunately, even Prince William and the Duke of Lute were staring blankly at the 2 heads on the ground. They fell into endless panic and shock, and had no time to care about their subordinates who were gradually becoming restless. No one knew who was the first to throw down their weapons, but it was like the first domino that fell. Under the chain reaction, the soldiers from both sides who had been fighting fiercely for half the night threw down their weapons one after another, and began to flee in all directions. Seeing this, Colin flapped his wings and flew towards the south gate of Silvermoon City. He did not forget that he still had an army of his family there. After hearing about the killing in the city, the Knight of Rigo would probably lead his army to attack. As for the Knights of Telda and the House of St. Hilda's guards who were acting as bait, Colin did not have time to care about them for the time being. After all, he still knew how to differentiate between close and distant. Under the flapping of his large bat wings, Colin's speed was extremely fast. Not long after, he saw the flames caused by the fierce battle in the south of the city. That should be the Knight of Rigo and his men. Just as Colin was about to dive down to help, he suddenly felt a weakness that came from the depths of his blood. Could it be that there was a time limit to the transformation? Colin was shocked and hurriedly rushed towards the nearest ground. He was afraid that he would lose his wings halfway and turn into a pancake when he landed. The Knight of Rigo, who was still fighting bravely, suddenly heard a loud boom. It was as if the ground had trembled. The Knight of Rigo, who did not know what was going on, hurriedly looked around vigilantly. Then, he saw a few half-elf girls screaming as they ran out of a small wooden house by the side. The Knight of Rigo had obviously misunderstood their disheveled appearance. The Knight of Rigo, who had a strong sense of justice, immediately strode forward, ready to teach the scum who had taken advantage of the chaos in the city to harm innocent women. Bang! The Knight of Rigo kicked the door open and shouted, "Boy, get the hell out of here!" His words were stuck in his throat before he could finish his sentence. This was because the Knight of Rigo recognized the shirtless man, who was frantically wrapping a bedsheet around himself. It was Colin. Their eyes met. The air suddenly quieted down. Lord Viscounts. Cough cough, please continue. Colin looked at the Knight of Rigo's timid appearance and was speechless. It's not what you think. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Find me some clothes. Yes. After Colin had finished dressing, the Knight of Rigo hesitated for a moment, but still felt that he had to make up for the misunderstanding from before. He touched his big bald head and smiled foolishly. "My lord, it's actually the half-elf commoner's honor to be chosen by you as your lover. You don't have to climb the roof, just tell me and I'll help you." "Shut up." Colin glared fiercely at the Knight of Rigo, feeling that he would not be able to explain this topic clearly. However, he still felt that he had to explain. "I was fighting with someone just now, and my clothes were all ruined. Then, I fell into this house." "I see." The Knight of Rigo had a look of realization on his face, but he did not know whether to believe it or not. Colin shook his head, and could only change the topic stiffly. "How are the casualties among your men?" "Not many. Although the half-elf guards have a lot of people, their fighting power is not that great." Colin nodded. "All right, then gather the troops and follow me." "Yes." When the first rays of the morning sun shone on the top of Silvermoon City, the beautiful garden city had already lost its former glory. This sudden rebellion had caused the whole city to fall into chaos, and it was as if Pandora's box had been opened, releasing the dark side that had been hidden in some people's hearts for a long time. Theft, rape, arson, murder. Countless crimes had taken place one after another last night. In addition to the rebels who had escaped from the palace, the whole of Silvermoon City had turned into a living hell in the blink of an eye. Of course, this hell was only for the half-elf commoners. The half-elf nobles who had their own private armed forces and strong castles were naturally not affected much. For example, the Miller family. "Colin, it's great that you're okay." At the entrance of the Miller family's manor, Vera jumped into Colin's arms with a look of surprise, completely ignoring the gazes of the people around them. Of course, the people around them did not dare to show any strange looks, and they all turned their heads and pretended not to see anything. "What can happen to me?" Colin hugged the girl's soft body and smelled the fragrance at the tip of his nose. He suddenly felt that all the trouble he had been through for so long was not in vain. After the joy of reunion gradually faded, Vera shyly left Colin's arms and turned around to look for the Knights of Telda. She was puzzled and asked, "Where are the Knights of Telda?" He got separated during the battle. "I have already sent someone to look for them. Don't worry." Of course, Colin would not tell Vera that he had used the Knights of Telda as bait. "Okay." Vera trusted Colin. Colin looked past Vera and looked at Queen Aisha. "Your Highness Queen Consort, Silvermoon City is in chaos now. His Majesty the King has been killed during the chaos. Therefore, I need you to rush back to the palace immediately to take charge of the situation. His Majesty has passed away." When they heard the news that the old king had died, everyone exclaimed with different expressions on their faces. Queen Aisha also had a shocked and sad expression on her face. However, Colin, who knew the other party well, could see the joy in her eyes. "Yes, Your Highness Viscounts. I will return to the palace now. I wonder if you and Miss Vera can come with me? The half-elf kingdom needs the support of both of you now." Vera naturally looked at Colin and asked for his opinion. Colin pretended to be reserved and nodded. "Of course, we are willing to lend a helping hand in times of crisis, because of the friendship between the half-elf kingdom and the northern frontier for so many years." After that, Colin turned around and ordered the Knight of Rigo, "Open a path and escort Queen Consort and Miss Vera into the palace." "Yes, Your Highness." The Knight of Rigo replied loudly. After a night of fierce fighting, the half-elf Silvermoon Guard had already been destroyed, and the Angeli family's army had become an important military force in Silvermoon City. Soon, Colin and the others entered the palace smoothly. At this time, the palace was no longer as solemn as it used to be. Bloody corpses could be seen everywhere. When Colin walked into the main hall, he saw Prince William kneeling in front of the old king's corpse. He did not even react when Colin and the others walked in. When Queen Aisha saw this, she stepped forward and whispered, "William, Miss Vera and Viscount Angley are here." Prince William slowly turned his head and looked at the entrance of the hall. However, his eyes were still unfocused. Miss Vera, Viscount Angley. Even the news that Vera had come back from the dead did not make him as shocked as he should have been. This loyal and honest half-elf prince did not have his own opinions. After his father's death, it was as if he had lost his soul. He was muddle-headed and did not know what to do. Colin stepped forward and said, "Your Highness Prince William, this rebellion has caused Miss Vera to have serious doubts about the House of Media's ability to control Silvermoon City and continue to lead the half-elf kingdom. Therefore, after consulting all the half-elf nobles, Miss Vera has decided that the House of Media is no longer suitable to continue to lead the half-elf royal family. Therefore, the throne will be inherited by Aisha Miller. Do you have any objections?" Prince William's body trembled, and his unfocused eyes finally regained focus. He looked up at Vera, and then looked at Queen Aisha. Finally, he turned his head and looked at Colin. Colin's face was as cold as water, and his eyes were as cold as ice. Prince William did not know why, but he suddenly felt as if he had returned to the nightmarish night yesterday, when the demon descended from the sky and twisted his father's head off. Therefore, the half-elf prince finally crawled on the ground and trembled. "I have no objections." Chapter 130. This coup d'état came and ended very quickly. It was like a summer storm. If one was not careful, the world would be washed and changed. Most of the half-elf civilians had no opinion on the House of Media's initiative to give up the power of the royal family and let Queen Aisha inherit the throne and become Aisha's queen. The political struggles of the nobles had always had nothing to do with them. Moreover, for the half-elves who worshipped beautiful things, the beautiful Queen Aisha was much more pleasing to the eye than the old King Medowin. If there was a poll in the half-elf kingdom at this time, then the support of Queen Aisha would undoubtedly crush the support of the House of Media. For the half-elf nobles, although this coup d'état had a great impact on them, no one dared to stand up and question Queen Aisha at this time. In their view, Vera's attitude was the same as the attitude of the Duke of St. Hilda. Since the Dukes of the North thought that the Miller family was more suitable to become the half-elf royal family, then what could they do? If the messenger of the Eastern region stood up and questioned, perhaps some political opportunists would want to follow behind and shout a few times. But now, the messenger of the Eastern region had disappeared, so the half-elf nobles naturally did not dare to say anything. However, although Aisha had inherited the half-elf throne, the coronation ceremony could not be carried out for a while. This was because only the royal family of the Empire of Light, the San Lorenzo family, was qualified to crown Queen Aisha. Queen Aisha had already sent a messenger to Imperial Dragon City. If there were no accidents, the San Lorenzo family would soon send a messenger to crown Queen Aisha. In the main hall of the palace, Colin sat casually on the throne, as if he was the real king. Meanwhile, Queen Elsa was reporting to Colin respectfully, "That's right. The Silvermoon Guard has been basically eliminated. The officers of the House of Media have been demoted and transferred, and replaced with people from the Miller family. However, the Silvermoon Guard suffered heavy losses this time. After regrouping, there were less than 20,000 men left. I plan to issue a conscription order after a while. Since the House of Media took the initiative to give up its position, it saved us a lot of trouble. Therefore, I intend to bestow the title of Duke to William Media. This way, I can appease the people and show my benevolence." However, the Lute family who participated in the rebellion did not deserve this mercy. They would be stripped of all their lands and titles, and the Duke of Lute would be sentenced to death by hanging. The Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce had been forced to close down, and the Savoy family members had been expelled from the half-elf kingdom. In addition, the assets of the Lute family and the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce are all listed here, as well as the assets of the gnome's treasury. Please take a look. Colin's interest was immediately piqued. He quickly took it and flipped through it. This is just a rough estimate. I'm afraid we'll have to wait a few days for a more accurate estimate. Good. Colin looked at the numbers that made him dizzy at the end of the document. He was so excited that he almost forgot himself. He knew that the half-elf kingdom was rich, but he did not expect it to be to this extent. He suddenly felt that he did not need to worry about the expenses of the cavalry army of his dreams anymore. With the money tree that was the half-elf kingdom, perhaps even if his territory in the northern frontier did not expand, he would still be able to raise an army of tens of thousands of cavalry. Therefore, what Colin needed to do now was to hold this money tree firmly in his hands. He could not let anyone touch it. Not even the Duke of St. Hilda. Oh right, the Black Cavalry should be entering the country soon. Send someone to welcome him. Yes. Before Colin left, he had told his butler, Eamon, that he would send a letter back every 5 days. If he did not receive a letter after 3 days, Eamon was to immediately inform Marquis Garcia. When Vera faked her death, the House of Media had sealed off Silvermoon City, thinking that this would cut off Colin's contact with the outside world. However, they did not know that even if there was no contact, it was still a kind of contact. Calculating the time now, the Black Cavalry should be arriving at the Half-Elf Kingdom soon. When Marquis Garcia arrived at Silvermoon City, Colin felt that he had a lot of things to discuss with the other party. In particular, the Duke of St. Hilda had repeatedly forced him. This time, he even plotted to assassinate Vera. This was absolutely unacceptable. Colin believed that as long as Marquis Garcia was on his side, there was nothing to be afraid of the Duke of St. Hilda. Oh, by the way, can you help me deal with this staff and exchange it for gold coins? Colin handed the Earl of Avon's staff to Queen Aisha. Yes. After instructing Queen Aisha to stabilize the situation in the Half-Elf Kingdom, Colin walked out of the palace. He walked all the way to the royal garden. The place had not been completely cleaned up yet. There were still broken branches and leaves everywhere, as well as broken petals all over the ground. But even so, Colin still felt that this place was very pleasing to the eye. This was because Vera was in the garden. At this time, Vera was sitting on the swing in the middle of the garden. The bright morning light shone on her body through the gaps between the leaves, forming a mottled light shadow. The morning dew had not completely disappeared yet, and Vera's gorgeous face was faintly discernible in the faint mist. A few spotted butterflies were floating up and down around her body, but she was frowning. It seemed like she was deeply immersed in a melancholic mood, and had no time to care about anything else. What are you thinking about? Colin walked over and reached out his hand to gently stroke Vera's eyebrows. It seemed as though he wanted to help her to ease her worries. Vera did not avoid Colin's intimate actions. She did not want Colin to worry about her. Therefore, she forced a smile and said, "Actually, it's nothing much. I was just thinking about something that someone said to me in this garden that night." "Who?" "It's the leader of the rebel army. His name is Sith. I heard that he is a descendant of the former half-elf royal Savoy family." "What did he say to you?" Colin already knew what Vera was worried about, but he still pretended not to know. After all, Vera did not know that Colin was also present that night. He said, Vera's beautiful brows furrowed again. He said that he was ordered by father to assassinate me. "Then what do you think?" Colin asked slowly. "Do you believe in your father or the enemy?" Vera tilted her head, as if she had finally realized something. "Of course, I believe in my father." The girl's mood immediately brightened up again. "I am so stupid. How could I be so confused about such a simple question for so long? Sith must have lied to me on purpose. Colin, help me push the swing." Colin smiled and helped Vera to push the swing. Looking at the girl's innocent smile, he suddenly dismissed the idea of telling her the truth. It was not only because he did not want these dirty things to tarnish the beauty in front of him. It was also because he suddenly realized that if he wanted to tell Vera everything, he would have to tell her about the complicated feud between the Duke of St. Hilda and Marquis Garcia. In this way, he would have to tell Vera the identity of her real father. However, this was forbidden by Marquis Garcia. Therefore, Colin planned to wait for Marquis Garcia to arrive at Silvermoon City before he could decide whether he wanted to confess everything to Vera. "Aha! Colin, come and sit on the swing too." "Okay." Of course, Colin wouldn't refuse such an invitation. With a leap, he nimbly squeezed onto the swing and sat side by side with Vera. The familiar fragrance rushed into his nose and went straight to the bottom of his heart. Chapter 131. The rustling autumn wind swept up the fallen leaves. There were very few people on the streets of Silvermoon City. After a tragic coup d'état, the half-elf capital was still under military control. The slave market in the west of the city was not as busy as before. The Hyacinth Merchant Guild had already been surrounded by fully armed half-elf guards, who were constantly moving out all sorts of things. In a dark alley 1,000 meters away from the Chamber of Commerce, Ross Savoy sneakily poked his head out and carefully observed the situation of his family's Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, the situation was not good. Ever since his brother Sith's head fell from the sky and landed in the palace, Ross knew that the Savoy family's operation had failed again. However, he did not despair too much because Queen Aisha did not kill the Savoy family. She only banished them. The half-elf nobles had a tradition of forgiving the losers. Moreover, not only did the Millet family not hate the Savoy family, they even had to thank them. If it weren't for the Millet family's coup d'état, the half-elf throne wouldn't have fallen into their hands. However, although the Savoy family was saved, their assets were all confiscated. Ross sighed and reluctantly looked at the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce one last time before turning to leave. However, when he turned his head, he saw a man in a black robe standing quietly in the shadows behind him, coldly looking at him. Mr. Chong, why have you come to Silvermoon City? Mr. Cheng's lips curled into a mocking sneer. What? Can't I come? Of course you can. However, as you can see, our family has just met with a disaster, so we can't entertain you. Mr. Chong ignored Ross's politeness and directly asked, Do you know why you failed? Ross shook his head and respectfully asked, Please enlighten me. Because you were too greedy. Mr. Chong's tone was cold. Moreover, you did not follow my instructions. A trace of anger appeared on Ross's face, as if all the anger and fear that had accumulated over the past few days had suddenly exploded. Do as you say? Mr. Chong, you were not in Silvermoon City at that time. How would you know what we were facing? The development of the situation was beyond everyone's expectations. My brother and I could only adapt according to the situation. Improvise. Mr. Chong chuckled. This is the first time I've heard someone describe betrayal in this way. Betrayal? Roth seemed to have thrown caution to the wind and roared furiously. Do you really think that the Savoy family is still a dog raised by your family? Wake up. It was no longer 300 years ago. You've become a stray dog, and can only rely on the support of the trolls to survive. You expect us to be loyal? You can talk about loyalty to the Savoy family when you dare to come out into the open without that damned hood. In the face of Roth's harsh sarcasm, Mr. Roth didn't get angry. Instead, he sighed and said unhurriedly, Yeah, it's been more than 300 years. The world has almost forgotten about my family. The once loyal servants have also begun to find other ways to survive, forgetting their past vows. After pausing for a moment, Mr. Chong suddenly laughed. However, I never expected your loyalty from the start. After the lesson at the northern frontier, I've already understood that vows are laughable. Loyalty is just a bubble under the sun. It looks dazzling, but it's actually fragile. Mr. Chong took a few steps forward, his smile growing brighter. But I think that the most laughable thing is still you people. You think that you're very smart. You don't want to be a chess piece, but you also want to be a chess player. But in fact, you can't even see the chess game clearly. You don't even know where the real chess eye is. Mr. Chang's words made Roth confused. He didn't understand what he meant. However, Mr. Chong didn't seem to expect him to understand. It was as if he was just saying it to himself. In your eyes, you only see Silvermoon City and the half-elf throne. Haha. But how can these unimportant things be qualified to become the real focus of this game? Roth more or less understood this time, but the feeling of being belittled made him even angrier. He couldn't help but mock again. Silvermoon City's situation has already been decided. What can you do? The situation has already been decided? Mr. Chong chuckled and shook his head. I haven't used my killer move yet. Moreover, didn't I tell you that Silvermoon City is just an unimportant corner of the chessboard? It can't decide the outcome of this game. Then what's your killer move? Roth was getting more and more annoyed with Mr. Chong, who was pretending to be mysterious. My killer move. Mr. E was halfway through his sentence when his voice suddenly turned soft, and his words became unclear. Roth didn't hear it clearly. He took 2 steps forward curiously. Just as he was about to ask, he realized that he couldn't speak. He felt as if there was a piece of burning charcoal in his throat. It was so hot that he was about to spit fire. In the next second, he really did spit fire. Then the fire quickly ignited his face, his head, his neck, and spread to his entire body. In the end, Roth struggled in pain and turned into a pile of ashes. You don't have the right to know my killer move. Mr. Chung laughed coldly. His gaze passed through the dark alleyway and looked in the direction of the northern frontier. Northern frontier, Fallen Eagle City. The fat merchant, Oliver, was sweating profusely as he welcomed a woman in luxurious clothes into the Tulip Merchant Association. Madam Penny, we can't go on like this. If we don't sell those grains, although we can make a lot of money from the increase in grain prices, but I'm afraid we won't live long enough to earn that money. Penny's wine-red eyes stared coldly at Oliver. She asked in return, "What are you afraid of? Don't worry, with me here, the Earl won't arrest you for hoarding grains." Oliver believed her words. After all, she was Earl Amon's most beloved lover. Naturally, she had the confidence to deal with the Earl. However, Oliver still said anxiously, "Madam, I'm not worried about the Earl." "Then what are you worried about?" "I'm worried about those slaves and commoners who are going crazy from hunger. Did you know that during the invasion of the trolls this spring, a large number of fields missed the spring plowing? Now, famine has begun to spread in the northern frontier. If we don't sell our grain now, I'm afraid people will starve to death. It's just a group of slaves and commoners. If they die, so be it." Penny looked unmoved, as if she was no longer on the same level as him. "Madam, have you ever been hungry?" Oliver began to become impatient. He no longer hid some things. "I have been hungry. Moreover, I know that feeling. It's worse than death. It can turn people into lunatics, into beasts, into terrifying creatures that devour everything." Penny looked coldly at Oliver and said with a smile, "Continue." Oliver hesitated for a moment, but did not dare to continue. "Isn't it just a rebellion?" Penny said in a relaxed tone. "Since you know, then why? Take care of yourself, Mr. Oliver. You won't starve." Penny gently patted Olaf's chubby face and said, "Don't worry. But if you do something you shouldn't do, then it's not necessarily the case." Chapter 132. At the end of October, the winter dungeon could feel the approaching winter. The bone-chilling rain fell for 3 days and turned into snowflakes on the 4th day. On the 5th day, when the long-absent sun finally broke free from the dark clouds, chilly Winter Castle had become a world of snow and ice that was covered in silver. But the residents of Winter weren't in the mood to appreciate the beautiful scenery. Most of them were running out of food. Is there no sign of food prices falling? In the study in the courtyard of the Lion's Roar Castle, the Duke of St. Hilda asked as he added firewood to the fireplace. Behind the Duke was a middle-aged man with an amiable temperament. He had a pair of sea-blue eyes that were filled with waves of wisdom. His white ponytail was carefully combed and blown to the back of his head. His clothes were exquisite, but not extravagant. An ancient handwritten scroll was fastened to his waist, and his left hand was wearing a white glove. Don White. The residents of the Lion's Roar Castle called him Scholar Don. Though the title of scholar wasn't a noble title, it was still very precious. Only those who had studied at the Empire's White Tower Academy and graduated were qualified to use the title of scholar. The number of graduates from the White Tower Academy could be counted with one hand. Therefore, every scholar was the best candidate for a court official, and they were naturally the targets of the dungeon lords. No, Scholar Don shook his head. His expression was full of worry. In the past 3 months, the price of food in the northern frontier has increased by more than 20 times. It's definitely not just because of the poor harvests caused by the trolls' invasion. Someone is deliberately hoarding food and manipulating the price. They're just merchants who are willing to sacrifice their lives for money. The Duke of St. Hilda was full of disdain. Issue a duke's order to the dungeon lords of the northern frontier to control the merchants in their territories. If the price of food is still high in half a month, don't blame me for killing them. Yes. Scholar Don nodded. Is there enough food for the Golden Lion Legion? If there's no large-scale war, there's still enough. Scholar Don hesitated for a while before reminding him. However, Your Grace, I still suggest that you purchase another batch of rations just in case. Hearing this, the Duke of St. Hilda frowned. He clearly understood what Master Dawn was worried about. Famine was the easiest factor to trigger a rebellion. Thus, the Duke of St. Hilda immediately nodded and said, "Then let's purchase another batch." All right. However, the price of food in the Empire is rather high right now, so I'm afraid. No matter how high the price is, buy it for me. Yes. The Duke of St. Hilda threw a few more logs into the fireplace. Looking at the dancing flames, he suddenly asked, "Where is the Black Cavalry now?" Scholar Dwayne carefully looked at the Duke of St. Hilda's face, but he couldn't see any obvious emotions on his face. The latest news came yesterday. Black Cavalry has left the northern frontier and entered the half-elf kingdom. Yes. The Duke of St. Hilda nodded, but he didn't give any instructions. The raging flames were reflected in the Duke's deep eyes, as if revealing his restless heart. Seeing this, Scholar Dawn was about to leave when he suddenly heard a majestic voice from outside the castle. "Duke of St. Hilda, Otto Volkin, the northern prince of the Troll Empire, hereby challenges you to a duel in the name of revenge for His Majesty Murdoch." Asterisk boom. Asterisk a blazing flame suddenly exploded in the fireplace. The Duke of St. Hilda suddenly stood up and looked out of the window. A troll warrior emitting a terrifying aura was standing at the highest point of the Lion's Roar castle, looking down at the guards who were constantly gathering below. Seeing the Duke of St. Hilda about to leave, Scholar Dawn hurriedly stepped forward to dissuade him. "Your Grace, it is said that Prince Otto has just advanced to the Sanctuary realm." "So what?" The Duke of St. Hilda didn't have the slightest intention of backing down. "Am I supposed to hide in the Lion's Roar castle and let him strut around outside?" After saying this, the Duke no longer cared about the stunned Scholar Dawn and strode out. The southwest border of the half-elf kingdom. The Black Cavalry was camping here. After Marquis Garcia finished drinking the meat soup, he casually wiped his mouth and asked Marquis Dawson, who was beside him, "We should be passing through the Shadow Canyon in another 30 miles, right?" "Yes, Your Grace." Marquis Dawson's attitude was still as respectful as ever. Even though he had been conferred the title of Marquis and had pledged his loyalty to the Duke of St. Hilda, he still didn't dare to offend the Duke of St. Hilda. However, when Marquis Garcia gathered the Black Cavalry and marched into the half-elf kingdom, this former chief butler of the Black Cavalry also came to help without hesitation. "Send someone to investigate carefully," Marquis Garcia ordered. Marquis Dawson smiled and said in a slightly disapproving tone, "Your Grace, this is the half-elf kingdom. What danger can there be? It's always right to be cautious." "Okay, I'll arrange it." Seeing Marquis Garcia insist, Marquis Dawson promptly nodded in agreement. After the rest, the army set out once again. Marquis Garcia urged his horse forward in the Shadow Canyon, but there was a trace of worry between his brows. "Dawson, have you sent someone to investigate this canyon?" "Your Grace, please rest assured. I've already sent someone to investigate thoroughly. This place is very safe." Marquis Garcia nodded and continued forward, but the more he went forward, the more Marquis Garcia felt that something was wrong. That kind of feeling of trepidation shrouded him, as if something bad was about to happen. "Stop!" Finally, Marquis Garcia ordered. "Your Grace, what's wrong? We're only halfway there." Marquis Dawson hurriedly asked. "It's too quiet here." Marquis Garcia's gaze was cold, as if he had realized something. The next moment, he decisively ordered, "Turn around. The rear army becomes the front army, and the front army becomes the rear army. Withdraw from the Shadow Canyon." "Your Grace." Marquis Dawson had a puzzled expression. "Your Grace." Marquis Garcia ignored him and insisted that the military officer immediately go forward to give the order. Just as the Black Cavalry began to change their formation, a loud sound suddenly came from the canyon. Rumble! Marquis Garcia suddenly turned his head and saw a dazzling flash suddenly erupt from the two cliffs behind him. The terrifying arcane energy was like the might of the heavens, blowing apart the two cliffs in the middle of the canyon. Countless shattered boulders rolled down, smashing towards the waist of the Black Cavalry. Bang! Bang! Miserable cries and hoarse neighs resounded through the canyon. Marquis Garcia's face instantly became incomparably pale. While he was in a daze, he suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from his waist. Turning his head, Marquis Garcia saw that the subordinate he had trusted the most had stabbed a dagger into his waist. "Farron Dawson, you traitor!" Facing the furious gaze of Marquis Garcia, Marquis Dawson took a step back and smiled calmly. "My apologies, Your Grace. Previously, when my subordinates were investigating this canyon, they weren't too careful." Chapter 133. Why? Marquis Garcia looked at Marquis Dawson, who was restrained by the angry black cavalry officers, and asked with a gloomy expression. Marquis Dawson smiled and calmly said, "I'm sorry, Lord Marquis. You have shown me great kindness, and I don't want to betray you. However, in order to let the dwarves fulfill their long-cherished wish of establishing a nation, I have to do this." Establishing a nation for the dwarves? Marquis Garcia's eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. Then he pointed at the pure white Pegasus flag that had suddenly risen above the canyon and asked, "Is this the promise the House of St. Prospero gave you?" Marquis Dawson shook his head. "No. In fact, I didn't know that the ambush in Shadowy Canyon was actually the army of the eastern border." "Then who encouraged you to do this?" Marquis Dawson smiled somewhat playfully. "Lord Marquis, why don't you suspect the Duke of St. Hilda? After all, he is the lord I am loyal to." Marquis Garcia remained unmoved. "No one knows my brother better than I do. He wouldn't be so stupid." "Why? The Black Cavalry is now the biggest unstable factor in the northern frontier. Don't you suspect that your brother wants to take this opportunity to eradicate the threat of the Black Cavalry?" Marquis Garcia had an extremely complicated expression on his face. He sighed and said, "You don't understand." Marquis Dawson frowned and then shook his head. "It's fine if you don't want to say it. However, I can't reveal the name of the person who gave me the promise." Marquis Garcia sneered. "You think I can't guess if you don't say it? The once colorful tiger has now become a dog that only dares to hide in the shadows. You actually believe in the promise of a family that can even betray their own race? What a joke." Marquis Dawson's expression changed. He seemed to be deeply hurt by Marquis Garcia's words. Then he became angry out of humiliation and roared, "So what? If I don't believe them, should I continue to believe in your House of St. Hilda? We dwarfs have served you for over 1,000 years, but have you ever looked us in the eye? Perhaps the establishment of the dwarves' nation is just a joke in your eyes, but it is the highest mission that our ancestors have fought for." Marquis Garcia hesitated for a moment. There were some things that he did not say. He waved his hand dispiritedly and ordered, "Let him go." "Marquis." The angry officers were naturally incomparably shocked. "Let him go." Marquis Garcia emphasized again. "Marquis." Marquis Dawson clearly hadn't expected the other party to let him off so easily. Marquis Garcia's cold once again sounded. "Dawson, today. If I kill you, perhaps you will become the hero of the dwarven race. Therefore I let Dawson live. Dawson son Dawson. At the same time, I want to see with my own eyes what kind of joke your so-called dream of establishing a country for the dwarves is. Get lost." Marquis Dawson's face turned green and red. Finally, under the contemptuous eyes of the Black Cavalry, he staggered away. At this time, the shouts of the Eastern soldiers were constantly coming from the top of the canyon. Naturally, the content was to ask the Black Cavalry to immediately put down their weapons and surrender. The current situation of the Black Cavalry was indeed extremely bad. The narrow terrain of the Shadow Canyon made the cavalry squeeze together, making it impossible for them to organize a charge. Moreover, the falling boulders had cut the Black Cavalry's formation in half. Except for a small part of the troops that fell behind, most of the soldiers were blocked by the layers of boulders. If they were to move forward, there was no doubt that the Eastern Army had set up layers of obstacles in the front of the canyon, waiting for the Black Cavalry to rush through and break their heads. In the face of such a desperate situation, Marquis Garcia still remained calm. He then waved his hand to summon a high-ranking military officer and ordered in a low voice, "Knight Roger, go back immediately, climb over the boulders blocking the way, Gather the troops behind and lead them back the way they came. Rush out of this canyon. Marquis. What about you? I can't go. Marquis Garcia pressed the wound on his waist. Although it had been simply bandaged, black blood was still oozing out. No. Marquis, I will escort you out. Marquis Garcia glared at Knight Roger and said in a firm tone. I will not abandon the Black Cavalry. But you must go. It doesn't matter if I die. But the Black Cavalry must leave behind a spark. Knight Roger still wanted to say something. But Marquis Garcia didn't give him a chance and roared in a low voice. Shut up. Listen to me. After you withdraw with the rear army, don't get entangled with the Eastern Army. And don't go back to the northern frontier. Go north around the Shadow Mountain Range and spend some time to reach Silvermoon City. When you get there, find Viscount Angley and ask him a question. Should the Lord of the Northern Frontier be surnamed Saint Hilda? If he says yes, then you will be loyal to him. Otherwise, you will kill him, return to Coldwinter City, and be loyal to the Duke of Saint Hilda. Do you understand? Yes. Knight Roger quickly nodded. He seemed to want to say something else, but he was stopped by Marquis Garcia's fierce gaze. Hurry up and go. Knight Roger had no choice but to kneel on one knee and solemnly bow to Marquis Garcia before leaving with red eyes. Marquis Garcia waited until Knight Roger was far away before gathering his officers and asked, Is there anyone who wants to surrender? We will never surrender. Everyone shouted without hesitation. Good. A smile appeared on Marquis Garcia's face. There are only Black Cavalry who die in battle. There are no Black Cavalry who surrender. Pass down my order, dismount, advance, and kill. Woo! In the harsh sound of the bugle, the battle suddenly broke out. As the most elite army of the northern frontier, and even the entire Radiant Empire, the Black Cavalry did not lack the courage to fight with their lives on the line. Even if at this time they had lost their biggest advantage, but the fighting spirit that broke out in the desperate situation was still impressive. Under the leadership of a group of officers, the Black Cavalry soldiers all abandoned their horses and rushed to the mouth of the valley on foot. They climbed over the layers of obstacles set up by the Eastern Army, shouted the name of the Radiant Lord, and launched an attack on the enemy. Release the arrows! The arrows suddenly became the main character in the air, like a dark cloud shuttling back and forth. However, such a rain of arrows could not scare off the Black Cavalry. They were like locusts rushing out of the narrow mouth of the valley, rushing to the Eastern Army's position. Blood flowed freely, and corpses were scattered all over the ground. The battle at the mouth of the valley became extremely tragic from the beginning. The corpses of the Black Cavalry soldiers quickly piled up at the mouth of the valley, forming a terrifying hill. The strong smell of blood drifted in the air, suffocating people. The Eastern Army, who originally thought that victory was in their hands, began to feel a chill in their hearts and shivered. It was as if those who rushed over without fear of death were not human, but a group of crazy beasts. Chapter 134. Silvermoon City, Half-Elven Palace. In a dark and gloomy basement, Colin was biting the neck of a half-elf, sucking on it continuously. This half-elf was a ranger from the Lute family, sentenced to death by hanging because of his participation in the coup d'état. However, on the day of the execution, he was secretly swapped. The one who was hanged was another prisoner with a similar figure and appearance. As for him, he was brought to the basement of the palace and became Colin's test subject. Colin wanted to know, other than the human race's divine profession, knights, could other races' divine professions be turned into blood descendants as well? However, even after Colin bit the ranger from the Lute family for a long time, the embrace ceremony he was looking forward to did not happen. It seemed that the elf race's divine profession, rangers, could not be turned into blood descendants. Sighing, Colin pulled out his canine teeth. Not long after, the ranger from the Lute family stood up again, his eyes dull. Just like Cynthia, he had also become Colin's blood slave. A level 3 ranger blood slave. Not bad. Colin stroked his chin, comforting himself. Taking out a monkey mask and putting it on the ranger, Colin smiled and said, Yes, from now on, your code name will be Monkey. The monkey ranger's eyes flashed, as if he understood what Colin meant. letting the monkey ranger continue to accompany the fox knight. Cynthia in the basement, Colin walked up the stairs. This basement led directly to the king's study. No, it should be called the queen's study now. Ever since the death of the old king, Queen Aisha seemed to have changed into a different person. The lingering melancholy from before had quietly faded away, replaced by a blossoming charm. It was obvious that she had dressed up meticulously today. She was wearing a red low-cut dress with thin shoulder straps, showing off her slender and curvaceous figure. A light blush, bright lip gloss, and an embroidered gold accessory stuck to her forehead made Aisha's beautiful face appear even more three-dimensional. Sparkling diamond-studded earrings dangled from her slender ears, setting off the queen's refined and noble aura. Seeing Colin walk out of the basement, Queen Aisha smiled, instantly brightening the entire study. "Lord Viscounts, are you done with your work?" "Yes." Queen Aisha did not ask what Colin had been busy with down below. She was a woman who knew her limits. Colin walked to the window and saw a group of priests gathered in the square outside the hall, asking curiously, "Heir, what are they doing?" Queen Elsa walked to Colin's side and stood next to him. She explained, "This is the tradition of the half-elf royal family. After every king dies, they will invite the priests of the Church of Light and the priests of the Church of Fate to pray for their souls." Colin was a bit of sus. What kind of traditions? The priests were praying for the old king. Would his soul return to the embrace of the God of Light? Or God? SSS, however, he did not say much after all. He had to respect the traditional culture of other countries. Seeing Colin's silence, Queen Aisha explained, "You said that we have to treat the House of Media well, so I let them arrange this ceremony." "You did the right thing." Colin nodded. "After all, your throne was given to you by the House of Media. You have to show them enough benevolence and gratitude to win their hearts." "All right. According to the plan, I will confer the title of Duke to William Medowin at the conferring ceremony tomorrow. However, there are still many members of the House of Media in the palace as courtiers. Should we take back some of these positions?" "No need. That will make you seem too petty." Colin looked back at Queen Aisha and said, "Moreover, it is not a good thing to let the Miller family dominate. The House of Media can be a good counterbalance." "I understand." Queen Aisha nodded. Even if Colin spoke frankly about the fear and wariness of the Miller family, who had become the new half-elven royal family, she did not have any objections. Colin looked at Queen Elsa's calm face and explained, "The result of a single family's dominance is corruption and depravity. Believe me, the Miller family can only prosper for a long time with a rival spurring them on." "I understand. Just like the northern frontier, because of the trolls, the army of the north is the strongest in the empire. Without an opponent, the eastern region can only rely on the natural moat of the New Shui River to block the enemy's advance." Hearing this, Colin laughed. "The raging river? I am afraid that it will not be able to protect the east for long. Of course, the Crystal River in the half-elven kingdom can be requisitioned at any time if the northern frontier needs it." Colin shook his head and said, "There is no hurry. If the Duke of St. Hilda really wants the Crystal River, he will have to ask me and Marquis Garcia's opinion." Queen Aisha smiled and suggested, "You can take the opportunity to ask the Duke of St. Hilda to marry Miss Vera again. I think this time, he will not refuse you." Colin nodded his head in agreement, obviously thinking the same thing. At this moment, he still didn't know that the outside world had long since undergone a drastic change, and the sea had turned into mulberry fields. Oh, by the way, you can also start to think about the issue of the heir. Colin was still helping Queen Aisha to plan. "You can choose a suitable candidate from the Miller family to be your adopted son." Queen Aisha did not immediately agree this time. A faint blush suddenly appeared on her flawless face as she softly said, "Compared to an adopted son, I would rather have a biological son." Colin raised his eyebrows and looked at Queen Aisha in surprise. Queen Aisha also stared into Colin's eyes, and at the same time, her soft and delicate body slowly leaned towards him. Colin's heart skipped a few beats when he felt the ecstasy of her touch on his arm and the fragrance lingering at the tip of his nose. However, he still maintained a trace of calmness and dissuaded her. You have to understand that it is impossible for me to marry you. Of course I know. Queen Aisha's face was flushed, and her breathing gradually became rapid. Vera is the most suitable marriage partner for you. However, I can be your lover. Everyone says that half-elves are the best lovers. Don't you want to verify the truth of this sentence? Colin stared at the queen's hazy eyes and persuaded her again. You have to think clearly. The child born like this can only be an illegitimate child. I have already thought about it. We can announce to the public that the child is the posthumous child of the old king. When he heard this, Colin's eyes lit up, and then he no longer suppressed the impulse in his heart, and he hugged the slender waist of the half-elven queen in front of him tightly. Queen Aisha could not help but let out a cry of surprise, and her whole body went soft, and then she leaned on Colin's broad chest as if she had lost all her strength. A strange feeling that she had never felt before made her heart pound like a little deer. Colin could clearly feel Queen Aisha's gentle and soft skin and mature and plump body through the thin dress. Will this child's surname be Morduin? Of course not. His surname will be Miller, and he will also be the next half-elven king. Vaguely, the prayers of the priests and priests could be heard outside the window. May the Lord have mercy on this respected king, and let his soul rest in peace. Chapter 135. On a small path in the forest, a small team of about 50 people was slowly moving south. It was close to noon when the team stopped by a small stream to set up camp. Brother, wake up. It's time for lunch. Anna shook the Earl of Avon a few times, but found that he still didn't move. She raised her eyebrows, clenched her fist, and punched the Earl of Avon's lower abdomen heavily. Ah, ugh. The poor Earl of Avon vomited from this seemingly casual punch. After a while, the Earl of Avon panted and turned to look at his violent sister. Why are you throwing such a tantrum so early in the morning? Early? It's already noon. The Earl of Avon waved his hand weakly. What's the difference? It's time for lunch. Do you want to eat? Yes, yes. The Earl of Avon struggled to get up. He knew that if he didn't eat now, his heartless sister would starve him until night fell. After all, they were members of the House of St. Prospero. Even if they were in the wilderness, lunch was sumptuous, but the atmosphere was a little stagnant. After returning from Silvermoon City with no results, everyone's mood had been low. Of course, the Earl of Avon was an exception. He was still as carefree as ever, only caring about drinking all day long. Just as everyone finished lunch and was about to set off again, the scout who had gone out to scout the surroundings suddenly turned back, and he brought back an extra person. My lord, this is the messenger of the Skyhorse Army. The Skyhorse Army was the direct army of the House of St. Prospero, the master of the eastern region. It had always been in the hands of the Duke of St. Prospero. However, in recent years, the Duke of St. Prospero had begun to train his eldest son, Marquis Vincent. He had handed over the daily training of the Skyhorse Army to him. Oh, why are you here? The Earl of Avon's sleepy eyes suddenly brightened, as if he had suddenly sobered up. My lord, Marquis Vincent is in Shadow Canyon right now. He just led the Pegasus Legion to fight the Black Cavalry of the northern frontier and won. I'm going to bring this good news back to White Dew City. Black Cavalry? And he won. The Earl of Avon's eyes almost widened, as if he had heard a fantasy story. Yes, Your Excellency, we defeated the Black Cavalry. Furthermore, they even captured Marquis Garcia. The messenger's face was red with excitement as he shouted, Really? Big Brother defeated Marquis Garcia? That's amazing! Anna exclaimed excitedly. However, the Earl of Avon frowned instead. Although he and his big brother were not on good terms, it was not to the point of jealousy at this time. He was only keenly aware that something was wrong. The Earl of Avon was very clear about how capable his big brother was. He could actually defeat Marquis Garcia, who had outstanding military achievements. Why did this sound like a huge lie? Where is the Pegasus Legion stationed now? In Shadow Canyon. Let's go and take a look. The sky above Shadow Canyon was still shrouded in thick smoke. The stone walls on both sides of the canyon were also scorched. Crows and vultures flew in flocks above the canyon and fell into the canyon. fighting with the wild beasts in the mountains for the corpses that littered the ground. At a glance, the scene was exceptionally terrifying. When the Earl of Avon and the rest arrived, the smell of blood almost suffocated them. It was only now that the Earl of Avon finally believed that his big brother might have really defeated the Black Cavalry. "Evan, Anna, haha, you're here. It's been a long journey." As soon as they met, Marquis Vincent greeted his younger brother and sister with a glowing face. As the first successor of the St. Pras clan, he was now in high and vigorous spirits. After defeating Marquis Garcia's Black Cavalry, Marquis Vincent felt that he had become one of the top generals of the empire. "Big brother, congratulations. Father will be proud of you when he knows." Anna sincerely congratulated her brother. However, the Earl of Avon was different. He first gave a perfunctory congratulation, then immediately raised his doubts. "Big brother, how did you lure Marquis Garcia into Shadow Canyon? You don't have to worry about that. Anyway, the Black Cavalry was almost completely annihilated in this battle. Even Marquis Garcia was captured by me. What else do you have to say about such a battle record?" The Earl of Avon obviously had something to say. He growled angrily. "To be able to lure Marquis Garcia into such a dangerous place, it's obvious that there's a problem within the Black Cavalry. Even if you don't say this, I can guess it. However, since you already had such a plan, why didn't you tell me in advance? I could have cooperated with you in Silvermoon City to perfect this plan even better. I could have even used this opportunity to—" "Enough!" Marquis Vincent forcefully interrupted his brother. "You've accomplished nothing in Silvermoon City, and you're blaming me? Haven't you always boasted of your unparalleled wisdom? Why do you still need my help?" The Earl of Avon sighed inwardly. He understood that the reason his brother didn't tell him about the plan was that he was afraid of him and didn't want him to share the credit. However, this fear not only chilled the Earl of Avon's heart, but it also made him angry. In the face of the threat of an external enemy, the House of St. Prospero actually couldn't work together. Instead, they were plotting against each other. Taking a deep breath, the Earl of Avon forcefully suppressed his anger. His tone gradually became cold. "Then, my good brother, may I ask how many troops you've brought with you this time?" 200,000 troops. "What about now? How many are left?" Marquis Vincent was slightly stunned, but then he pretended to be tough and said, "About 100,000. "How many are there exactly?" the Earl of Avon continued to ask. Along the way, he'd already seen the wounded soldiers in the camp, and the atmosphere was depressing. This didn't look like an army that had just won a great victory. Marquis Vincent's gaze was somewhat evasive. "The specific casualty count hasn't been completed yet. Why are you asking about this? How can there be no casualties in a war? Especially the annihilation of a strong army, like the Black Cavalry, on the northern frontier. How can there not be a certain price to pay?" This time, the Earl of Avon was sure. His brother only won a Pyrrhic victory, even though he had the advantage of time and place. "What do you mean the statistics haven't been completed yet?" It was estimated that more than half of the 200,000 troops were lost. With such a loss ratio, the Earl of Avon didn't know whether to lament the collapse of the Eastern Frontier Army or be shocked by the terrible destructive power of the Black Cavalry in the face of despair. But no matter what, he was sure of one thing: his brother was used as a knife. Unfortunately, Marquis Vincent was still complacent and immersed in the false halo of victory. He didn't realize this at all. The Earl of Avon suddenly felt a little tired and asked, "Where's Marquis Garcia? Can I see him? He's seriously injured and still unconscious. How about this? Evan, you and Anna are responsible for escorting him back to White Dew City and handing him over to my father. In addition, there are a lot of wounded soldiers in this battle, so you'll be responsible for leading them back to White Dew City. What about you?" The Earl of Avon suddenly had an ominous premonition. Marquis Vincent straightened his chest and put on a confident look. "I'll lead the army north to attack Silvermoon City and firmly control the half-elven kingdom in my hands." The Earl of Avon wanted to dissuade him, but when the words reached his mouth, they changed. "Okay, brother. Then I'll wait for your triumphant return in White Dew City." Chapter 136. Circusius, I didn't expect you to be a part of this ambush. The Earl of Avon sent off his brother, and the army heading north, then turned to a middle-aged man in a white mage robe and smiled. Cusius didn't seem to want to talk about this topic, so he simply replied, I just happened to be there. Of course, this kind of words couldn't fool the Earl of Avon, but he didn't pursue the matter. This ambush on the Black Cavalry involved many forces, and the Earl of Avon felt that he had to go back and ask his father personally to find out the truth. However, looking at the group of injured soldiers gathered around him, the Earl of Avon couldn't help but frown. At this moment, he clearly understood the terrible price his brother had paid in order to ambush the Black Cavalry. Out of the 200,000 men in the Pegasus Legion, 30,000 had died, 50,000 were injured, and 20,000 had deserted under the Black Cavalry's crazy counterattack. In other words, the Pegasus Legion had already shown signs of collapse. If the Black Cavalry hadn't shed his last drop of blood, the victory of this ambush might not have belonged to the eastern region. In addition, 18 knights had died in battle, including a 5th-grade knight. Such a terrible price in exchange for the destruction of the Black Cavalry. The Earl of Avon didn't know whether it was worth it or not. At this moment, he finally understood why his brother insisted on continuing to lead the army to the north. The ambush had taken advantage of the right time and place, but it turned out to be a Pyrrhic victory. If Marquis Vincent returned to White Dew City like this, his reputation would definitely be ruined. The Duke of St. Prospero wouldn't easily let go of his son, who had caused more than half of the Pegasus Legion. The Earl of Avon suddenly felt that Marquis Vincent's trip to Silvery Moon City, this time, might not be smooth sailing. With a sigh, he didn't want to worry about his brother anymore. So he turned to the messenger and said, Let's go. Yes. Half-Elven Palace. After the conferring ceremony, the banquet officially began. Colin casually dealt with the half-elf nobles who were trying to suck up to him. Then he sent them away and went up the spiral staircase to the 2nd floor. The cold night wind blew into the empty palace, making the silence here a sharp contrast to the bustling downstairs. Colin took a few steps forward and saw the beautiful figure leaning on the balcony. Tonight, Vera was wearing a pink rose crocheted dress. The length of the dress was about 10 centimeters above her knees, and it accentuated her long and slender legs. This is the first time that I have seen you wearing stockings, Colin said as he stood behind Vera. Vera turned around and smiled at Colin before she said, This is a gift from Queen Aisha. Because there was no such chemical material as nylon, the stockings in this world were generally made of silk and cotton. The silk stockings produced by the half-elf kingdom had always been very popular among the noble women. Well, it suits you very well, Colin nodded as he looked at the stockings. Vera could not stand Colin's burning gaze, and she shyly stretched out her hand and pulled down the hem of her dress. However, it was obviously a little futile. Colin's heart beat faster when he saw the young girl's shy posture. Colin took a few steps forward and stood side by side with Vera. He looked at the stars in the night sky and asked with a smile, Why are you here alone? Is the banquet very boring? Yes, it is a little boring. Vera nodded with a melancholy expression on her face. Colin seemed to understand something and asked, Are you homesick? Vera turned around and looked at the man beside her. Colin's warm gaze made her gradually feel relieved, and she smiled before she said, Yes, a little. Don't worry. Marquis Garcia has already led the Black Cavalry to pick us up. You will be able to go back very soon. Okay. Vera nodded obediently. However, Colin's next sentence almost made the young girl's heart jump out of her throat. After we go back, I will ask the Duke to marry you. Vera didn't say anything and didn't dare to look at Colin. However, her fair face was flushed red in an instant, making her look extremely beautiful. I heard that. The person who killed the previous king that night was called the Winged Knight by everyone. Vera blushed and changed the topic stiffly. Colin was amused, and he also felt that it was very interesting. Is that so? Winged Knight. It sounds very powerful. Then, do you know why the Knight Guild has the bat wings? Vera was relieved when she saw that Colin did not continue the previous topic. However, she also felt a little lost. Maybe he is also a druid. Colin decisively told her the reason that the Earl of Avon had helped him to think of. Druid? But isn't this profession extinct a long time ago? Who knows? Maybe it is not completely extinct yet. Vera nodded thoughtfully. Then this winged knight must be a half-elf. After all, druids need the blood of elves to practice. That should be the case. Colin suddenly felt that he could ask Queen Aisha to arrange someone to deliberately lead this topic. In this way, everyone would be looking for the winged knight among the half-elves, and they would not look at Colin suspiciously. He could also use the identity of the winged knight to do some things that were not convenient for him to do. At this moment, Colin suddenly heard light footsteps behind him. When he turned around, he saw Queen Elsa standing there in a splendid dress. Viscount Angley, Miss Vera. Am I disturbing the two of you? Of course not. That's good. I came up to inform the two of you that the Black Cavalry is about to arrive at Silvermoon City. Really? Uncle Garcia is about to arrive? Vera exclaimed in surprise. Yes, the Silvermoon Guard patrolling outside the city has encountered the Black Cavalry's outpost and sent back a signal. Then let's go to the city gate to welcome them, Colin said as he strode out. Although it was close to midnight, the city gate of Silvermoon City was still illuminated by countless torches. Colin, Vera and Queen Aisha stood side by side at the city gate. The guards of honor behind them were also in formation. After a while, the ground began to tremble slightly. In the rumbling sound of the horses' hooves, a thin black line suddenly appeared from the darkness and continued to spread towards Silvermoon City. This familiar sense of oppression made Colin completely calm down. But not long after, he frowned. This was because he smelled a trace of the smell of blood. Moreover, as time passed, as the Black Cavalry continued to get closer to Silvermoon City, the smell of blood became stronger. Queen Aisha also realized that something was wrong. She turned to look at Colin and said, Viscount Angley, something seems to be wrong. Colin pursed his lips and did not say anything. Vera's expression also became a little anxious. She seemed to want to say something, but when she saw Colin's solemn expression, she immediately swallowed her words. Finally, the Black Cavalry arrived at Silvermoon City and began to slow down. At this time, the people who came to welcome them finally saw the appearance of the army. Almost all of them were covered in blood. Moreover, the number was not right. The 50,000 Black Cavalry was definitely not the scale that was in front of them. An ominous premonition shrouded Colin's heart, causing him to feel cold all over. Under the shocked gazes of the people, a knight covered in blood walked out of the crowd and came to the city gate. Do-la-la. The half-elf honor guard did not know what was good for them and played the welcome song. However, Queen Aisha turned around and stopped them with a sharp look. Knight Roger came in front of Colin and the others, turned over, dismounted, took off his helmet, knelt down on one knee and said in a choked voice, Miss Vera, Viscount Angley, the main force of the Black Cavalry has been ambushed in the Shadow Canyon. Marquis Garcia is surrounded. We do not know if he is alive or dead. Wow. This bad news suddenly made Colin feel dizzy. He could not believe his ears. Marquis Garcia was ambushed? How was this possible? And in a place like the Shadow Canyon? With Marquis Garcia's cautious fighting style, how could he rashly lead his army into the canyon, which was extremely dangerous for cavalry? Forcing himself to calm down, Colin asked, How did you get ambushed? Why didn't you investigate in advance? Marquis Dawson betrayed us. He deceived Marquis Garcia and led the Black Cavalry into the enemy's trap. Fran Dawson. The image of a dwarf suddenly appeared in Colin's mind. At the same time, he could no longer suppress the thought in his mind. Could it be that Marquis Dawson was ordered by the Duke of St. Hilda to betray Marquis Garcia? If this was really the case, then the Duke of St. Hilda must have been plotting against him and Marquis Garcia from the very beginning. Using Silvermoon City as bait, he wanted to completely eliminate the Black Cavalry, an unstable factor, so that the northern frontier would no longer have any noise. How many people do you have left now? 8,000. 8,000. Colin had a heavy expression on his face. Colin, Uncle he. Vera also had a panicked expression on her face at this time. Colin held Vera's small hand and solemnly promised her in Knight Roger. Don't worry, I will avenge Black Cavalry. Chapter 137. When the first ray of light shone on Silvermoon City in the early morning, Colin was still wide awake. After listening to Knight Roger's detailed description of the Black Cavalry's situation, Colin was not in the mood to sleep at all. Vera, who was worried about her uncle's safety, finally fell asleep after crying for a while. Colin gently covered Vera with a blanket, and then motioned for Knight Roger to follow him out. When the two of them came to the corridor outside the hall, a half-elf maid carefully approached them and asked, "Lord Viscounts, Lord Knight, would you like to have breakfast?" Colin did not have much of an appetite at the moment, but looking at Knight Roger's appearance, it seemed that he had not had a good meal for a long time. So he nodded and said, "Send 2 sets over." Soon, the maid came over with 2 plates. "Just put them on the ground." Colin did not want to disturb Vera's sleep, so he sat down on the stairs in the corridor. Knight Roger obviously did not care about these things at this time, so he also sat down next to Colin. When the maid saw this, she had no choice but to put the plates on the stairs, and then quickly left. After stuffing some food into his mouth, Colin asked again, "So Marquis Dawson did not say who planned the ambush?" "No, but Marquis Garcia said that it was not the Duke of St. Hilda's plan." "Yes." Colin was suddenly confused again. Originally, he was convinced that this was the Duke of St. Hilda's plot from the beginning to the end, but he did not expect that Marquis Garcia would deny this possibility. So why did Marquis Garcia think that his brother would not plot against him? The Black Cavalry in his hands had long been the biggest unstable factor in the northern frontier. Colin had previously wondered why the Duke of St. Hilda would plot against the half-elf kingdom, and even the eastern region, when the internal threat had not been eliminated. If the half-elf kingdom was just a bait, and the real target was the Black Cavalry, then everything would make sense. But why did Marquis Garcia believe that his brother wasn't the mastermind behind the ambush? If it wasn't the Duke of St. Hilda, then who instigated Marquis Dawson's rebellion? As if noticing Colin's confusion, Roger asked, "Sir Viscounts, do you suspect that the Duke of St. Hilda is behind this ambush?" Colin was silent for a moment before he shook his head. "Now that I think about it, it seems unlikely that this ambush was planned by the Duke of St. Hilda." "Why?" "I don't doubt that the Duke of St. Hilda can make Marquis Dawson betray Marquis Garcia. But how did he convince the Eastern Army to cooperate with him in setting up an ambush in the Shadow Canyon? You must know that the Northern Frontier's plot against the Half-Elf Kingdom has obviously touched the Eastern Army's sensitive nerves. The House of St. Prospero has probably been secretly guarding against the Duke of St. Hilda. So why would they cooperate with his plan to eliminate the Black Cavalry? Aren't they worried that the Shadow Canyon is actually a trap set up by the Duke of St. Hilda and his brother? After listening to Colin's analysis, Roger nodded in agreement. But then he rolled his eyes and asked in a seemingly casual tone, "But if it was really the Duke of St. Hilda who planned this ambush against the Black Cavalry, then is your promise of revenge still valid?" Colin was still thinking about who the mastermind behind the ambush could be, so he didn't pay too much attention to Roger's question. "Of course it's still valid. If the Duke of St. Hilda really did such an outrageous thing, then I will definitely seek justice for Marquis Garcia. Then will you kill the Duke for this?" Colin raised his head and looked at Roger. He suddenly realized that this was actually a good opportunity to subdue the remnants of the Black Cavalry. 8,000 Black Cavalry. They were definitely a military force that couldn't be ignored. Therefore, he answered straightforwardly, "If Marquis Garcia dies in this ambush, then I will definitely find a way to make the mastermind pay with his life, even if that person is the Duke of St. Hilda." Roger's eyes flashed, as if he was excited but also hesitant. After a moment he asked again, "Then after the Duke of St. Hilda dies, who do you think is suitable to inherit the position of Lord of the Northern Frontier?" Colin frowned, feeling that this Roger was a little strange. Why would he care about this kind of issue? According to Marquis Garcia's judgment and Colin's reasoning, the Duke of St. Hilda had basically been cleared of suspicion. So why would Knight Roger suddenly care about what would happen after the Duke's death? Looking at the serious expression on Knight Roger's face, Colin thought that Knight Roger was acting a little strange, because he was too shocked. I think that Miss Vera is very suitable to inherit the position of Lord of the Northern Frontier. Colin directly spoke his mind this time. Moreover, he also had the idea of testing Knight Roger. When he heard Colin's answer, Knight Roger seemed to be relieved. He smiled and said, "I think so too." Colin immediately realized that Knight Roger was also aware of the real relationship between Vera and Marquis Garcia. Otherwise, according to the rules of aristocratic succession, the third son of the Duke, Joyce, would be ranked before Vera. Therefore, Knight Roger's reaction could only mean that he also knew about Vera's true identity. And as a knight of Marquis Garcia, of course, he would be more inclined to support Vera. However, this was actually not too surprising. Marquis Garcia had asked Knight Roger to lead the rear army to break out of the encirclement. This obviously showed that Knight Roger was his trusted confidant. Therefore, it was normal for him to know about Vera's true identity. Just as Colin was about to test whether Knight Roger knew who Vera's biological mother was, the Knight of Rigo strode in and reported, "Lord Viscounts, there is news from the Shadow Canyon." "How is it?" Knight Roger could not help but ask anxiously. "The Black Cavalry in the canyon has been completely wiped out, and Marquis Garcia has been captured by the Pegasus Legion." Knight Roger's eyes instantly turned red when he heard the news. The veins on his right hand that was holding the sword were bulging, and the hilt of the sword was cracking. Colin sighed and comforted him. "Although this is not good news, at least it is not the worst. After all, Marquis Garcia is still alive, and we still have a chance to redeem him." "Yes." Knight Roger raised his head, and there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The Knight of Rigo touched his bald head and said, "My lord, actually, there is another piece of bad news from the Shadow Canyon." "What other bad news is there?" "The Eastern Army that wiped out the Black Cavalry is currently heading towards Silvermoon City. They are expected to arrive in about 5 days. Colin's eyes widened and he quickly asked, "How many of them are there?" "About 100,000. 100,000? Colin was a little worried. However, looking at the eager Knight Roger beside him, and recalling the careful guidance that Marquis Garcia had given him back then, as well as the half-elf kingdom that he had painstakingly taken under his control, Colin took a deep breath and said firmly, "I'm sorry." "What are you afraid of?" "Then let's fight. They actually dared to come to Silvermoon City. Isn't this an opportunity for revenge delivered to our doorstep?" "Good." Knight Roger responded loudly, and without hesitation, he knelt on one knee and presented his sword to Colin with both hands. "Respected Viscount Angley, I am willing to pledge my loyalty to you. As long as you are willing to avenge Marquis Garcia, the 8,000 Black Cavalry will be at your disposal." Colin's eyes lit up and he immediately took Knight Roger's sword and nodded on his shoulder. "I, Colin Angelo, accept your loyalty." That you're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.